And yes. Do you need that? Do you need headphones on?
I don't.
All right. Tad, when you talk, yell so Jim can hear you through the wall.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Tad.
You're in my nightmares. I hope you know that.
Oh, what a horrible thing to say to somebody.
What a horrible, vile young man that is. I feel violated.
No, because we've been editing
the obsessive editing.
We edited Little Bighorn one for like 2 months straight. It was nothing but you.
You know what, Ted? I can't hear a goddamn word you're saying.
You got him.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Oh, Barbara, you are such a curmudgeon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to us and to you to Addressing Gettysburg, number 122, if you're counting. And if you're not, who cares? We're talking about Pickett's charge today. Our guest is Jim Hessler, licensed battlefield guide, historian, and author with Wayne Motts of this book here, Pickett's Charge at Gettysburg. I'm going to clap on the book. It is like a walking tour. You can go around and it's got all these stops and stats and pictures and graphs and maps and everything like that. Very handy to have when you're exploring the Pickett's Charge ground. Joining us today in the studio, instead of Mikey B is on hiatus in England. And for like a month, he abandons us this time of year and goes to England. What he can possibly see in that place other than, all the history.
I think don't ask, don't tell.
Right. But sitting in his chair here in the studio, monitoring your comments, and not in a bad way, but to read them, because super chats of $10 or more get read on the air. Courtney Micker is here tonight in the hot seat in the third chair. And of course, in the back, we have Tad Skase and by the way, I feel like such a look at that. He's got his Matt Gillespie.
Yeah, I'm finally wearing it.
Yeah, his the hoodie that the Addressing Gettysburg hoodie that Matt Gillespie got him because he thought Tad was poor.
Yes,
and could only afford one sweatshirt or shirt or jacket or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
And so I told Tad, when you are here doing a show, you must wear Matt's hoodie. So that will always be here at the studio, so Tad does not forget. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Tad. And we've got a peanut gallery in the audience there. We've got Tim Day, Ken Wyman, and Debbie Jones. A couple things really important, and for those of you who don't like hearing about a little housekeeping at the beginning of a show, too bad. This is a business. First, let's get with the good news. Breaking news. Bombshell tonight. If I may do my Nancy Grace impression. Did you recognize that?
Is that what that
was? Individual arrested for Little Round Top Monument vandalism. Okay, on March 6, 2026, National Park Service law enforcement rangers with assistance from the Carlisle Police Department arrested. All right, we've got the name now. We know what LJR stood for. Mm-hmm. It's Lucas J. Reisinger, 36 of Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Wow. Let's see, they got him on 2 felony counts of destruction of veterans' memorials in violation of 18 U.S.C. Rensinger is accused of carving his initials into 2 monuments at Little Round Top and Gettysburg National Military Park back in September. He is scheduled to make his initial appearance before the U.S. Magistrate Judge in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg. I'm sorry.
I hope he's scared.
Sorry. Can I say what an idiot? On September 14th, 2025, the NPS Rangers received a report of an adult male using a knife to carve his initials into a monument on Little Round Top. An investigation determined that the initials LJR were carved into the plaque on the 44th New York Monument and into the face of Colonel Patrick O'Rourke on the 140th New York Infantry Monument. Through investigative work, Rangers developed evidence that led to a federal grand jury indictment and the issuance of an arrest warrant by U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Pennsylvania. Each violation carries a maximum penalty of $250,000 and up to 10 years in federal prison.
What's the minimum?
It doesn't say the minimum.
Just a warning.
Yeah, it's a slap on the wrist.
What did we say, 36 years old?
Yeah.
When the hell do you get that out of your system?
I got it out of my system at 12.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm 36, and I made a Facebook post, and this is a bold take, supporting his arrest.
That is bold.
That is a bold take.
It's a bold.
But we commend you for taking that brave public stance.
Yeah, wow. You are brave and so ahead of the curve. Wow, that's amazing.
Now, there is a rumor on the social media that he has a prior record. So
I wouldn't be surprised.
If that is true, this is probably not his first dance with the law.
Well, this is probably his dumbest.
Let's hope it's his last.
Yeah, right. Maybe he'll learn something from this. But anyway, so the good news, great job to the people who investigated that and figured it out.
Yeah, good job.
Really good job. Okay. One more thing. This is very important. Very, very important. We have to do this. Bob Passamenti is a listener of ours. He also knows Jim. Jim's going to be taking him on a tour in a few weeks.
Yeah, I am.
He said last week, I think it was, or I don't remember when, but he contacted Dave, who does our scheduling, and he said, I want to buy them dinner on the next Ask a Guide. And so Dave put him in touch with me, and he said he was going to get dinner from the Dobbin House, and he says, I want to get you guys a couple steaks. Like, okay, great. Couple steaks. So tonight, Tad went over to pick it up at 5:30, and I go downstairs to let Tad in, and he's like, you won't believe how much food there is. And I said, what do you mean, Tad? And I look at his car, and the trunk is open, and there are boxes of food. And I'm like, did he give us steaks or the cow? Because there was so much food, and then one of the boxes was huge. And so here, I have a little video of us unboxing. Everybody loves unboxing videos.
You texted me. I thought there was not enough food.
I said to you, I hope you brought, what did I say?
No, you said, you're not going to believe how much food there is. This could go either way.
Oh, yeah, you were thinking that we were skimped.
Yeah.
Oh, quite the opposite, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take a look and see what we got here. All right, Tad, what have we got here? You just went and picked this up.
We've got a feast.
We have look at this.
Look at that.
Oh, mein Gott. And then you got all of this. And what is this?
That's a cheesecake.
That's a cheesecake.
There's an apple pie.
And there's an apple pie in here. And loaves of bread. This is like Thanksgiving, and these are warm.
Yes.
Holy. And crab cakes. And what is that? House dressing.
We got bacon.
It looks like chicken noodle soup or something there. Ah, man. What is that, bacon? Oh, bacon dressing.
Yeah.
Okay. Good Lord in heaven. And these are fillets, you say?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Well, this is from listener Bob Passamenti, and thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
We eat well tonight, and we thank you for this. And wow, that's all. Let's take a look at the cheesecake. By the way, this is going to kill me. Oh,
look at that.
Tad, what were you racing up here? Look at you, knocked it all over the place.
That was yours.
What?
I didn't bring that one up.
Well, yeah, I brought it up after you drove all over God's green earth, bouncing on the fields and everything. All right, that's enough for us. All right, so there we go. That's all the food that we had.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Bob,
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Bob.
Our hero.
Incredibly, Jim.
Our hero.
Incredibly.
Did we even break open the apple pie though?
No. We're gonna have to divvy it up before we go tonight. Everybody's bringing something home. I can't take all that stuff home with me. That's insane. I'll gain all my weight back.
Well, you know what I said too. I do not like to normally eat before I speak or present.
Yes,
Bob, I appreciate this, but I think you've killed my performance today. I'm feeling kind of logy.
Yeah, all the blood's in my stomach, not in my brain, and so we're going to be a little slow tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
This could be the slowest Pickett's charge you've ever seen.
I know. I hope I can come up with something funny to say.
I was going to say, did you hope
See?
what? Hopes
See
and
what I'm saying?
dreams?
I'm already starting to crash here, Jim.
I hope this night is over.
Hey,
You know what? Let's do this next week.
I'm Matthew.
Yeah.
It's me, Mike from New Jersey.
Oh, hey, Mikey, how you doing?
We got ourselves a super chat.
Is that how Mike sounds to you?
Yeah, man.
Right? Yeah. Really? Okay, what's the super chat say?
Please give law enforcement a Dan Butterfield.
Damn right.
Dan Butterfield.
Parentheses, the guys who caught the vandal.
Yeah, let's give him two.
Dan Butterfield.
Thank you, Matthew Gillespie, for the super chat.
And that's what happens when you spend your time.
Good God, man.
That's what happens when you spend your time investigating real crimes and not busting people for picnics.
Well, that is a good point.
Thank you.
That is a valid point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, really quick before we start.
What?
Tim and I did a little something tonight.
Yes.
You were supposed to.
I was supposed to do it, and if you were a proper producer, you would have given me yours to wear, so it didn't embarrass me.
But it goes with my.
We recently passed the birthday of our old friend Peter Carmichael, and in honor of him, we were supposed to wear our scarves, and they did. They remembered, and nobody reminded me, and thank you for that, because it was my idea. And so there they are with their scarves, and so
nobody said anything to the guest.
Yeah. Well, because it was. Oh, we should do that on the show. They're like, oh, let's set this in stone, and I forgot it as soon as I said it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is that. Pete Carmichael's birthday was last week or the week before, and so we just want to wish him a happy birthday. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, Pickett's charge. Now, you think you know everything about Pickett's charge. No, you don't. And Jim Hessler knows everything about Pickett's charge. No, you don't. Right, Jim?
No, absolutely not.
Exactly. Nobody's making that claim.
Nobody's making that claim.
You did this book with Wayne Motts.
Yeah.
And so we want to say hi to Wayne for, because he's the co-author. It's only fair. But you're here, and we're going to get into Where do you want to start with Pickett's charge?
Where do I want to start?
Yeah.
Do you want to ask me why we did the book? I don't know.
Well, no.
What do you want to do?
Here's where
we've overeaten. The tryptophan is kicking in.
I know. Yeah. Here's what I want to start.
All right, where do you want to start?
Okay. It's not necessarily a start, but it's I want to make sure that at some point, we pay fair attention to the Pettigrew-Trimble side of things.
I had a thought on that. I think we should do a whole episode on that.
Would you rather do that instead of Pickett's division?
I think tonight just sort of do the overview and the whole thing. But I think I'll come back for Ask a Guide number 176 and just do Pettigrew and Trimble.
You think this show's going to last that long? Okay. Yeah.
I think after tonight's episode, we're getting canceled.
We're all done.
We're off to a slow start here.
Yeah, worries me when he says stuff like that. Just a little anxiety. That's
did you just buy a house in town or something? I mean, new mortgage or something? Or?
Haven't found one yet, but
everybody's looking.
Yeah.
Okay, so
where do you want to start?
So I just want to make sure that we do an even because you never hear about them.
No, you never do.
But yes, let's do a specific episode on just their part of the whole assault. Okay. So, but with Pickett's charge, though, where do we want to start with that? Let's start on the evening of the 2nd, or you want to start in the morning of the 3rd? It's up to you, Jim. You're the guide.
Is that how this usually plays out?
Yeah.
All right. How about we start on the morning of the 3rd? Get right into it.
Sounds great.
Because we've already burned
4 hours.
minutes here, 21 minutes.
Go ahead. Let's do that.
So it's the morning of July 3rd. Robert E. Lee is not feeling defeated. He considers the second day to have been a series of partial successes, specifically capture of the ground out at the Peach Orchard Emittsburg Road, foothold at Culp's Hill. And so these partial successes of the second day have encouraged him to continue the attack on July 3rd. And I think that's a reasonable place to start because, Matt, Court, what you so often get with Pickett's charge is this idea from so many people, even the most seasoned Gettysburg enthusiasts, that Pickett's charge was doomed to fail from the beginning.
Right.
It's a desperate, now I'm starting to get warmed up. It's a desperate last gasp by this half-crazed old man, trying to throw what's left of his army against this stone wall. And I think understanding the situation from the 2nd to the morning of the 3rd, the decision to attack, and look, we know in hindsight it's a bad decision. I mean, we know how it plays out, but knowing what you know on the morning of July 3rd, the decision to attack is not unreasonable. And I think that's a good place to start.
I think that's fair, right?
That's fair.
From our comfortable positions 160 something years later, it's very easy for us because we know what happens, right? And so we know the folly of this move. Lee doesn't. And Lee knows his army, and he's got confidence in his army. Would you say that he has, he doesn't give the Army of the Potomac enough credit, or does he underestimate them in any way, or does he estimate them?
Or does he do the only thing he can?
Or does he only have one choice and
to punch out? And if he has to go back, then so be it. At least he made a punch out.
I do think he underestimates. I mean, I do think the cliche of Lee in the Army of Northern Virginia being overconfident on July 3rd. Sometimes cliches are valid.
Yeah.
They're cliches. And I think in that case, because as you read the accounts from people who were there and on the ground in the memoirs and things of that, they do talk about this sense of overconfidence that does pervade its way through the Army of Northern Virginia. So I do think he's overconfident. And the flip side of that being, I do think he underestimates what the Army of the Potomac is still capable of doing. But I don't necessarily think it's his only choice. Because remember, when we talk about Pickett's charge, and I'm sorry, folks, the Pickett-Pettigrew-Trimble charge.
Yeah.
But, Pickett's charge rolls off the tongue easier, so indulge us on that.
It's true.
But what we consider the Pickett-Pettigrew-Trimble charge was really his second plan of attack for that day. Plan A, and Tim Smith, I think, kind of hates when we call it Plan A and Plan B, so this one's for you, Timmy. Plan A is really that renewed attack. Culp's Longstreet to attack the Union left, but Ewell becomes engaged at Culp's Hill before Longstreet is ready to renew the assault against the left. That goes into the mid-morning, late morning. And so, Lee's first plan of attack for the day, the general plan being unchanged, doesn't pan out. It doesn't happen. And so it's really this Plan B that becomes the assault on the Union Center that, again, the PPT charge, right? So Lee does have more than one option on the table, but the initiative that the Union takes really in starting the ball rolling at Culp's Hill at 4:30 in the morning, that initiative that the Union takes, conversely, takes the initiative away from Lee, and that gets things rolling. And again, what we know in hindsight is this spectacularly wrong decision.
So he makes the decision. This is what he's going to do. It's not his first choice, though, right? Like, that's not what he wants to do initially.
Right.
But with Pickett, he wants to use Pickett, but he wants to use Pickett to renew Longstreet's assault on the left of the Union line.
Right.
And what makes him move it to the center?
Well, so Culp's Hill starts at about 4:30 in the morning. Ewell is engaged at Culp's Hill. Lee rides down to Longstreet, who should be preparing an attack against the Union left, to find that Longstreet seems to be preparing instead to make this move to the reverse to get around what seems to be to get around the Round Tops. Lee doesn't want that to happen. Lee also knows that on the second day, uncoordinated attacks had not played out, so he doesn't need another round of uncoordinated attacks on the third. And it's at that point, and what time in the morning this is, who the hell knows? Could be 9:30, could be 10:30, could be as late as 11 o'clock. But Longstreet is not ready. Lee realizes that, so Lee calls off any further moves by Longstreet around the left, and now they start to look for the alternative. And it's as they look for that alternative, Pickett and the other guys are going to end up being directed against the center of the Union line, Cemetery Ridge, or the left center if you prefer. I tend to prefer calling it the left center.
Yeah.
Cemetery Ridge.
So he's going to use Pickett, and then the other two divisions in this assault are couldn't be more battered.
Yeah.
They did fine fighting on July 1st, but they took a fine amount of casualties as well.
Some of the highest casualty counts of the battle.
Yeah. And a lot of them are walking around bandaged up, walking wounded. And Lee sees this. And still he sends them in.
Sorry.
Now, here's a question that you probably get often, and I'm sure there's people thinking this, maybe somebody's even sent it in the questions. Thomas's brigade, and who's the other one? Mahone?
Well, you've got. So we're talking about the guys who they do not use,
who they're not using.
Yeah, right. So you've got the other half of Pender's division. Thomas in particular is a good choice because they really haven't done anything on the first, second, or the third.
Right.
And then yes, you have Posey and Mahone. They have not taken significant casualties. They've gotten kind of tied up on the second around the Bliss farm. There are, to the point I think we're getting at, there are other choices that can be used on the field, but they don't use them.
And does Lee ever leave a reason why, or does anybody say why he said that?
I think so. In a lot of cases, there's not a clear reason why. For whatever reason, they decide they are going to, I don't want to say support, but supplement Pickett. I'll use supplement Pickett with Heath's division, which becomes Pettigrew, half of Pender's division, which becomes Trimble. They don't really say why they use them. I think ultimately a lot of it just gets buckled down to, I think, poor staff work.
Yeah.
And some of the guys will say that. Porter Alexander will say that afterwards. Ultimately, one of the great failings of the day is inadequate staffs, small staffs, which results in, you could argue, sloppy staff work. So why do you pick those guys instead of others?
Interesting.
Yeah.
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 To that point, what I think, and I'm glad folks, if you can see on camera, Matt's looking very pensive now and saying interesting. Yeah, like that. That's Matt's pensive.
Interesting.
It's the cheesecake sugar kicking in now.
I was going to have a glass of bourbon, but I don't think I need to. I've got like a food high.
Yeah, I know. Where the hell were we?
I don't know.
The point is, you sort of ask these questions. One of the things I encounter when I do the third day, like if you go on a Gettysburg forum on social media and you ask people, other than the other hilarity that will ensue from that.
Yeah.
If you ask people, what's your favorite day at Gettysburg? First day, second day, third day. Third day will almost always come in last.
Yeah.
Because people consider the third day boring, straightforward. This Pickett's charge is just this boring frontal assault and they all get slaughtered. But right off the bat, we are asking questions that there are not clear answers to.
Yeah.
And that's part of the mystery of all this third day. And I think that's what still makes it interesting.
I think it is a mysterious day.
Yeah.
That's I wouldn't say it's like I don't like using this word with battles, but my favorite day.
Right.
It's not the day I'm most drawn to, let's say that. But when I do think about it, it's like a head scratcher for me. There's a lot, because there's this mystery with Lee, and not only the very common, like the first time somebody visits here, they'll say, what the hell was he thinking?
Exactly.
Right? There's that. To me, that's like the given. But on top of that, there's this mystery of, wait a second, he's sending 2 battered divisions in to go with Pickett, while there's basically or barely unused brigades available that he could at least maybe supplement those other 2 divisions with, like take the worst units out there and put the Thomas in or whatever. But he doesn't do any of that. And so it's a mysterious day to me, right? And
it is. And that's, that's one of the things that still makes it interesting. So you shouldn't say the third day is a boring day.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of head scratching, sort of mysterious moments. Why are these other guys not used? Thomas, the other half of Pender's division, Rhodes's division. And look, there are guys in Rhodes's division who beat up. Like nobody's going to say, hey, let's put Iverson into Pickett's charge.
Right.
But I think there's the guys in Long Lane who I think are probably pinned down by some skirmishing on the western end of Cemetery Hill. So, you want to ask, what are some of these guys doing? Some of them are skirmishing. But remember, too, on A.P. Hill's side, Anderson's division, right, Posey, Mahone, and those guys, you've still got this notion that I want to come to later, that if there's going to be a breach gained on the Union lines, some of these other guys are told, you are going to move forward then, and you are going to exploit any gains that will be, that are gained. So from that perspective, these guys are not necessarily sitting idle. Yeah. We just don't know why they didn't put them in why they made the choices they made. And I think that comes down to poor staff work. And at least it's the best explanation.
Do you think the distance and the terrain might have also had something to do with that? I mean, when you stand at, say, the Virginia Memorial, and you look at the Union position from there on a crowded summer day, buses, people, cars, the buses obviously are very noticeable, but the cars and the people are really small.
Yeah.
Now imagine them shrouded with smoke.
Yeah.
I don't really like, what are you seeing? How are you seeing? And unless there's word coming back to the line, we've broken through, send help. And was there? Was any word coming back to the main line, to Longstreet, to anybody, to Pickett, to anybody? We've broken through, send in reinforcements?
Not really, but if you think about it, Pickett is the division commander and his staff. You've got the brigades in the front line. They hit the Union wall. You've got Pickett and his staff. It's really going to be their role and part of their responsibility to say, okay, come on, bring up more guys.
And really, in fairness, they really didn't break through.
Well, that's exactly. And I know we've kind of jumped ahead on this, right? Yeah. We're talking about a breakthrough that, wink, wink, didn't even happen.
Right.
Purely hypothetical.
Purely what if, which, of course, we don't do what if history.
No, we don't. We absolutely do not.
Yeah.
No, we do WTF history.
And so going back to the point on that, the point is, we have some questionable choices for what I'm going to call the first wave of the attack, but the other guys are not supposed to be sitting idly by. If there is something gained, you are expected to come in and support and take advantage of that. And I think that does kind of tie into one of the questions we had. But so maybe we're getting to it a little.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah,
that's all right. This is a great time to mention Bill Chesley, sent us a super chat and said he did the Pettigrew-Trimble battle walk with Jim in 2022.
Oh, great.
It was fantastic.
Thank you, Bill.
Oh.
He would absolutely do it again if/when you offer it. Hint.
He only said hint once, Court. He only said it once. But we get the point.
You gotta jazz it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, I never get asked to do any of the out of the car tours. Hint, hint. But maybe we can set something up on our own.
Well, maybe we have other ideas. We have other ideas.
We do have other ideas.
Yeah, we do.
Well, Bill wants that one.
No. I mean, it's tour related. We talked about it.
Yeah, I thought that was
Doug's
dead.
party.
Is that not dead? That idea?
2027.
Oh, 27.
Yeah, I didn't tell anybody yet, but
let's hope I'm not dead in 27.
Oh God, Jim, don't even joke.
Well, all joking aside, Bill Chesley, thank you.
All joking aside, he's going to live.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Bill, you can leave now. You got your point in. But.
Okay, so one thing I'd like to do before we get into, because everybody does Pickett's charge, and everybody talks about the units and the going in and the cannonade and everything. And we're going to get to all of that stuff. Okay. But one thing nobody ever really does, and I was thumbing through your book to refresh myself this morning, like an hour before you got here, and let's set the scene.
Okay.
Because one thing that I find I'm starting to really think about more and more about these battles is these guys, they're not red bars on an animated map.
Right.
That map that shows farm field, it's all pretty and everything like that. But you march through a cornfield, you march through a field of alfalfa, I don't care what it is. You march through a field where there's stuff growing and there's fences and things, and some of them have been taken down. But, what is the posts are probably still in the ground, I'm guessing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know we have the Bliss Farm, right, which has been a problem, and that's going to be on fire. But also, if I'm not mistaken, the Sherfy farm barn is going to be on fire from a Union shell aimed at Longstreet and Lee, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it is, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, as they're sort of conferring in and around the that area.
And instead, it hits the barn, ignites the barn with their own, I'm sure they didn't realize this or aim for it, but their own troops, wounded men from the day before, are in that barn, and they'll be burnt to death.
Sad story.
So, okay, we've got two burning barns.
We've got skirmishers out ahead.
We've got skirmishers. What else? Set the stage here.
Well, I think you covered it all, Matt and Court.
All right, Court.
But you think about it too. You've had 2 days of battle.
Yeah.
So there are bodies on the field. There are animal carcasses on the field. It's got a smell. July 3rd, of course, is the hottest and most humid day of the 3 days. So you put all of that together, and I think everybody is tired. They are worn out. But yet, because Pickett's division is fresh and they're still coming on the field and getting back to what I was saying earlier about Lee's partial successes, I do still think there is an air of hope and confidence in the Army of Northern Virginia. Now, over on the other side of the field, on the Army of the Potomac side, They have voted the previous night at the Council of War to stay and fight it out. So there's sort of a resolution, I think a common purpose going on in the Army of the Potomac this morning. And what Meade is doing, what Meade is doing is basically shifting troops strategically all along the line to try to plug in some holes. Sickles is gone this morning, so Sickles is not around, and some of the mistakes that he made yesterday are being corrected. So I think what you have, you mentioned the skirmishing, so I won't repeat that, but between the skirmishing and just the movement of troops, even though there's not a lot of heavy fighting going on yet, you still have a lot of activity. And this is what you got to think of, back to your question, Matt, about, hey, we stand at the Virginia Monument, we look across the field and we can't see the cars and the tour buses. And I think I see Louis Trott giving a tour over there, and stuff like that. But remember, there's still close to 160,000 guys on this field, and the accompanying animals and wagons and cannons and all that stuff. So there's a lot going on.
So, the movie, of course, in reenactments, it's a very clean march. They stay in formation rather well.
Yeah.
Even when the explosions start in their ranks, the hole opens and they quickly and perfectly close ranks, right? I just have to imagine that in real life, it's not really like that. And even the formations are rough formations, but there's I don't care how veteran you are, like there's shit in the field. I mean, I don't mean poop. I mean, like there's stuff. Well, there's that too.
Right.
But like there's plants, there's all the things like I'm not even imagining, right? And I know we're looking at mostly rough wild grasses growing today, with the occasional crop planted and everything like that. But like these were active farms. They're being used. The ground is not just there; it's being utilized. And so I would just imagine like that has to have just made it difficult to go across there. And so I don't know, for whatever reason in my head, I wanted to just set the scene for people, the chaos of the burning and there's smoke from the cannons and all that.
And the heat
and the smell and I mean, we've got guys in Garnett's brigade. I'm sure others who, when the order comes to get up, a lot of them don't get up because the sun knocked them out.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're laying in the sun for hours.
You talked about crops and that sort of thing. Timothy and rye and the tall grass, a lot of these guys talk about during the cannonade, literally effectively suffocating in that grass, in the heat and the grass and the shells and everything flying over you. It's a lot to think about.
Court, you got a couple of things there, huh?
Yes. Mr. Gutty 117, he sends us a super chat based off BOGP episode.
Battle of Gettysburg podcast.
Available on YouTube, folks. Battle of Gettysburg podcast.
And
everywhere podcasts are
Matt's second favorite podcast.
It is.
No, it's my favorite.
Shut up.
Bravo.
I wish you.
You know what? I don't ever want to see Baricki back on this show again. I think you have found the perfect co-host here. Bravo.
Thank you.
It's all right.
Hey, listen. I thought that you were going to know what that abbreviation stood for, and I was ready with the bleep button for my running joke that we never mentioned that show, but ruined it, and I had to say it anyway.
I caught you when you're on History Underground bleeping us. That was hilarious.
And there was another one.
I only caught the one on History Underground.
No, it was another one more recently.
Oh, hilarious. Why do you support every other content provider but not us?
I have you on the show all the time.
I know, but you bleep me then.
Oh, but then I let them say it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead. Finish this thing.
Yes.
Based off
BOGP.
Bog episodes and Doug Dowd's staff episode.
That's one of ours.
Is Lee at this time, with his health issues, in parentheses, taking way too much responsibility on himself to coordinate everything? Because it seems like a big communication breakdown.
Yeah, that is a point that Doug makes. Matt, you're playing with the board. You're not playing with the beep.
No. I'm adjusting everybody's levels.
That is a point to be made, that the commander of the Army, Robert E. Lee, because he has a comparatively small staff is doing a lot of stuff that, frankly, the commander of the Army shouldn't be dealing with. You know, the advantage Meade has with the bigger staff is he can competently turn over quartermaster duties and artillery and medical and all this stuff that you know, the record is incomplete, and we should point that out, but you do get the sense Lee is putting his hand and his finger into a lot of stuff that he probably doesn't need to be doing. And look, you know, one 56-year-old guy in questionable health can only do so much. And you might think, okay, maybe he should be focusing on strategy and what we're going to do and let the details go to other people. So, yeah, it's definitely a consideration.
What's the other one there you got from 6 questions?
We've got one from the incomparable 6 questions Lentz. What was the condition of the post and rail fence that ran along either side of the Emittsburg Road? How much does the ground undulate? Is it flat?
He knows the answer.
I know. Yeah, that's all right. Do you want me to answer that now or later or when we get into the charge?
Well, answer it now. Answer now, and then we'll refer to it later.
He gave you the set?
It says, going for the slam dunk here. So, oh, Mike, before I go in for that slam dunk, I'm going to get another piece of pie here. So, all right. So, so what is the condition of the fence? So the condition of the Emittsburg Road fence, like everything else at Gettysburg, has been a point of contention for these last 163 years. I am of the belief that the fence running from, let's say, the peach orchard to roughly, give or take, the Cadore farm, I'm of the opinion that with some, no doubt, with some exceptions, but that fence is more or less intact. And the reason why I say that is because particularly in Pickett's division, we have accounts of guys saying that this fence was an obstacle. We had to kind of squeeze our way through the posts and rails. Bullets are thudding off of the fence. I mean, we have accounts of people saying that.
Yeah.
And if you want to say, well, you know, I knew the Battle of Gettysburg better than the people who were actually here, which, you know, there's people in our community who do that.
Yeah.
More power to you. But I have to say, based on the accounts from Pickett's division, there was at least enough fence still standing to be part of an obstacle. Now, I do think, you know, guys, as you know, the way the Emittsburg Road kind of angles over towards Cemetery Ridge, I do think as you work your way further up north and you get more up to the front that would have been crossed by Pettigrew and Trimble, I do probably think more of the fences had been dismantled on that part of the line. You know, in the 8th Ohio, they talk about when they were put into position in the Emitzburg Road on the night of the 2nd, they piled up a lot of posts and rails as a barricade. You know, so it's not a standing fence, but it's still a barricade. So I think from that perspective, hopefully that kind of gives people a sense of the fence.
Well, and I don't know if I would want to take that fence down, maybe enough so that I could like filter some skirmishers out, but like it's a good obstacle.
That's the thing. You know, I've walked that charge.
I mean, if I'm the Union, in other words.
Yeah. You know, and I've walked that charge hundreds, if not thousands of times with groups. I don't know. I don't count my tours like some people do, but you know, you often get the alpha male on the tour. Why didn't they just kick it down? Well, you know, wait a minute. It's a sturdy post and rail fence, and bullets and artillery projectiles are flying at you. Yeah. So it's not just, you know, alpha male is gonna push it down.
Yeah, the Pennsylvania Dutch are pretty good at seating their fences.
And it's not this Lowe's Home Depot type of pressure treated split rail fence.
Exactly. That vinyl crap.
It is like a planed piece of a tree.
Yeah.
It is.
You know, that's a good point. And the other point I'll make that I often make on tours, you know, if you're the Confederates and you're charging across the Emitzburg Road, you're hitting that fence twice.
Yeah.
You're hitting a fence on the west side of the road. You are then going into a sunken road, which the Emitzburg Road was, and you now got to hit that fence again on the east side. And if you're looking at the eastern fence, you're in the sunken road. You know, that fence is no longer at ground level with you. So that thing is going to be even harder to break down. Ever try kicking down a fence that's above your head?
No.
I mean, I took karate when I was like in 7th grade, but I can't do that kick, and I don't think many of Pickett and Pettigrew's guys could do it either.
No,
so,
you're not kicking that over.
you're not kicking that over.
If you don't know that you're going to be moving over that ground in great numbers, what's the utility in taking down the fence anyway?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Why would you really spend time?
Right. Well, and also you can't send pioneers out to do it because it's way too close to the Union line.
That's exactly it. I mean,
You're behind their skirmishers.
A lot of that is honor behind the Union skirmish line. That's exactly right.
But I mean, and that's the thing is like I remember when I first started learning about this, I had those thoughts myself until I learned there was a Union skirmish line, in between the fence and the Confederates.
Right.
But that's not always on maps. That's
point.
not always talked about on a 2-hour tour. You can't squeeze that little tidbit
skirmish
in there.
lines almost never show up on a map, and we take our maps in our books as gospel. And
Right.
They're not.
They're not. No.
And I don't. This is just a curiosity that I have had. I don't know if you have any accounts from the skirmishers out there between the lines, but that is one perspective that I just find mind-boggling.
The skirmishers.
To be caught between the two
During the cannonade.
Yeah, during the cannonade. I mean, what is? You can't go forward. You can't go backward. But the
Projectiles
ordnance
are flying
unimaginable.
Just that constant.
And there's a YouTube video where a guy tried to fire a round and then multiply it. And
Yes, I saw that.
if it's just a fraction of what it was like, I don't know.
I think that's the other thing too about movies, that they have to make everything discernible sound wise.
Yeah.
But I think in real life, when you read these accounts, it's just noise.
Right.
Because I'm talking about the bombardment. It's like constant noise, a constant rumble, thunder. The ground is shaking. Their ears are bleeding.
Yeah,
they're screaming into the ear, lip to ear of the guy next to him, and he still can't hear him.
Right.
Like we
Traumatic
can't
brain
fathom
injuries
that.
happening.
Just from the sound.
Right.
Yeah, we can't imagine that. There's nothing I've been through that's like that.
No, certainly no Billy Joel concert I've ever seen.
All right.
Does Billy Joel rock it up that loud?
I don't know. You'll have to ask Matt.
Hey, six had a second part to his question. The
go ahead.
undulating terrain. So
Yes.
answer as Mike well knows. Yes, it is an undulating. But for other listeners, it is undulating terrain. It dips, it swales, it goes up, it goes down. There are areas where you are in defilade. There are areas where where you could be under fire or not under fire. Where the other side can see you, where Pickett and Pettigrew's guys can stop to reform their ranks, where they have to. You read it in a book, you look at it in a book, and it's a flat table map.
Yeah.
And kind of like you said before, you don't understand. If I'm looking at it in a map in a book, of course, the maps in my book are great.
Yes,
but if you're looking at the maps in other books, these flat table maps, as you said before, they're not, why can't that red bar just move next to that red bar? And why don't they see each other? Right. And don't they see that blue bar that's on the other side of the map? And of course, when you get out on the field, it's nothing like that.
That's a great point, because a flat page, even with what do they call them? The topographical lines, you still don't know what sight lines you have from that.
Right.
And so here's an example of one of the maps in Jim's book. You did this all by hand, right?
No, so the maps were done, I do want to clarify, because we want to give a shout out. The maps were done for that book by Steve Stanley, who is the map maker for the American Battlefield Trust. Now, when we did this back, the book came out in 2015. I feel like we're a little late to the party. The book's only 11 years old, folks. You all have a copy, right?
Well, we lost some time because of COVID and stuff.
That's right. There was COVID in
People
the dark
couldn't get books.
ages.
There was the great book shortage of 2020.
Yeah.
But I do want to shout out. Steve Stanley did those maps, American Battlefield Trust. At the time we were working on the book, he was hot off doing the complete Gettysburg Guide, which 2009, 2010 was a really, really popular book. I just want to give Steve a shout out.
Yeah.
To your question, I have no idea how he made the maps. Hand-drawn, who the hell knows?
I know, it's a joke.
I know.
By the way, Gary Edelman is watching us tonight. So hello, Gary.
Hey,
Thanks
Gary.
for watching.
Hey, man.
Okay, so let's get to the troops that we're talking about here and get them charging. So we got Pickett's division.
Yes.
Fresh.
But
he's dealing with 3/5 of his full complement.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes. So Pickett's division, of course, we all know, we're all seasoned students, comes into Gettysburg with Garnet Kemper and Armstead's brigades. Corse and Jenkins brigades, which were large brigades in total, I think about 3,700 guys. They had been left behind in Virginia, which again, folks, in of itself is not an uncommon practice in the Army of Northern Virginia. You know, somebody will be left behind for foraging or guarding Richmond or guarding a railroad or whatever. Yeah. But in this case, they get left behind on the most infamous and written about charge in Civil War history. So, of course, it becomes a point of conjecture, but Corse and Jenkins brigades, about 3,700 guys total, are left behind. So Pickett really only comes in here with what I think is less than 5,000 effectives. Now, when we were I don't know what the current mindset is on this, but when we were doing that book, I can tell you a lot of secondary accounts had Pickett at like 6,000, 6,500 guys.
That's what I've always heard. Yeah.
I think that's wrong. I think, based on even what they said, effectives, you hear 4,500, you hear 4,800. I'll say give or take somewhere about 5,000. So not only is it 3/5, but Corse and Jenkins' absence makes Pickett's guys, by Confederate standards, a small division.
Prior to the Battle of Gettysburg, how many battles was Pickett's division in?
Yes. So prior to the Battle of Gettysburg, Pickett's division was in no battles. Now, I want to clarify that. The regiments and the brigades and the general officers had experience. They had been in other battles in the Army of Northern Virginia, but Pickett's division, as it was formulated, had been relatively new. Longstreet's guys miss the Chancellorsville campaign because of the foraging expedition down in Suffolk. So this is Pickett's first battle commanding Pickett's division.
And Fredericksburg, he's like all the way on the right and doesn't see any action.
Yeah, right. And so, and he had been wounded for a while and took a while to recover. But I just do want to clarify, these are not rookie troops.
Right, so they're not green,
exactly,
but just as Pickett's division.
It's the first battle for Pickett's division.
So this is their big chance
to
really show under Pickett, or this is really Pickett's big chance to show his mettle as a division commander.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and putting that in context, a lot of these guys, even though they have experience, a lot of these guys now haven't seen action since the fall of 62. Mm-hmm. So I do think there's a lot of these guys who are chomping at the bit, foaming at the mouth, whatever analogy you want to use. They want to get in there. This is a big chance.
Piddling in their britches.
In their britches, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another one my grandmother used to use.
Really?
Yeah, you're just piddling in your britches. No, she never said that.
I was going to say, was Grandma from Tennessee? Where was Grandma from?
She was from New Jersey.
Oh, Jersey. Yeah.
She said, "Hey, Matt."
Yo, Matt.
Hey.
Yeah, she was like Mike.
We're from New Jersey.
Yeah, your Mike and your Ralph and my grandmother impressions are all the same.
And Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, they all Bernie. All right, so they're going to, now let's talk over at the Pettigrew-Trimble side of things.
Right.
Who are the brigades there? Because a lot of those brigade commanders from day one are no longer in command.
You are correct, sir. That is right.
Yes.
So we touched on it earlier. Pettigrew's front line is Heath's division. Well, Heath isn't around. Heath, the division commander, Heath is wounded on July 1st. So Pettigrew steps up. Working our way from left to right. Yeah, Brockenbrow's brigade. Do any of us like Brockenbrow? I know Rob Abbott does, but I think most of us don't. Okay, Court kind of got him.
Kind of likes him.
You kind of like
him. My point of view is always they did more than I did.
Which is
fair. That's fair.
Fair but firm.
Yes.
That is fair but firm. The I kind of say who likes them. Let's phrase that differently. Brockenbrow's guys. There are allegations among the troops of not the best behavior. Right. And look, I think overall Brockenbrow's guys, like a lot of guys, get a bad rap, but they're not the best brigade on the field. So Brockenbrow's on the left. Then you have Davis's brigade. Do we like Joe Davis? Well, a lot of people really, where was he in the railroad cut? His uncle, nepotism allegations. So then you have Pettigrew's normal brigade, but because he's commanding the division, you got Marshall, so there's a step up. And then last but not least, you have Archer's brigade, and Archer's been wounded, so Fry has stepped up. So
Archer's captured.
Well, he got
And
wounded and
yeah.
captured. He's out of the picture. So Archer's out of the picture. So you have, let's sort of do the math on that. Pettigrew, Marshall, Fry, and, you know, and again, we don't really kind of like, I don't really like Davis and Brockenbrough.
Yeah.
So, you know,
it's okay.
Yeah. Now in the back line, then you have Trimble.
Yeah.
And that's half of Pender's division. And where's Pender? Pender's mortally wounded, so he's no longer on the field. Trimble comes in as a supernumerary.
Yep.
Trimble comes in looking for an assignment. He gets half the division. They're going to put two of the brigades back there, Lane's brigade, Scales' brigade. Scales wounded, so Lawrence is put in command of the brigade.
You say Lawrence or Lawrence?
I always say Lawrence.
Okay.
I always say, I know it's Lowrance. I don't talk Southern, so.
I just go, this guy, and I point to it on the map.
Well, even how do you say
Lowrance.
Brockenbrow? There's a
Yeah.
debate on Brockenbrow.
Yeah.
You know, you could do a whole how do we pronounce shit episode. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could,
We should do that, yeah.
Well, we should do that.
Because there's always debates, and I think they're moot and pointless.
Things that make you-
Cemetery
Yeah.
Hill.
Not cemetery.
See, now I don't know.
Yeah.
Things that make you go, all in for.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, where were we?
So, Trimble, you threw in the word supernumerary.
Yeah.
It was studying this battle where I first learned that word. Thank you for that, Gettysburg.
Look, Gettysburg teaches us supernumerary. It teaches us cops. It teaches us salient. I'm sure high water mark. Are these words and terminology we use in the modern vernacular?
If practicable,
Yes.
Very good. Practicable. Right? Who talks like this?
nobody.
Yeah.
My dad still says, tolerable, sir.
From
From the movie.
Yeah. You all right, TJ?
Yeah.
Tolerable, sir.
My wife bursts out laughing at that scene every time she sees it.
Why?
I don't know. It's just funny. How are you, TJ? And he's got all the mud in his hair. Tolerable, sir.
No, it is well played.
Don't you have her
Yeah.
on the show and ask her why she laughs at it? How should I know?
Maybe she could call in. 717-420-1978 is the phone number if you'd like to call in, ask a guide a question. All right, so
yes.
so Trimble is the supernumerary, which means he's a general without a command, basically.
Yes.
He's just floating out there in the wind. There's that scene in the movie Gettysburg that he goes in and yells at Lee about Ewell and his damn bloody head is the damn bloody hill is as bald as his damn bloody head or whatever he says. And but he does finally get a chance to do something, and that will be on July 3rd.
Yeah.
So he's now new to command this division.
Right.
Is he familiar with any of the troops, and are they familiar with him? Did he serve with any of them prior to Gettysburg?
Without regurgitating Trimble's service record, he says these men were entirely strangers to me.
Okay.
And so, he's probably coming at. I think the scene in the movie, if that didn't actually happen, I think that captures the spirit of Isaac Trimble probably perfectly. He says these men were entirely strangers to me, and I did the best I could to get them motivated, to get them pepped up, and to lead them into the objective.
All right, so you've got Pettigrew commanding a division from the division, but new to division command.
Right.
And you've got Trimble, not from the division, foreign to these guys, commanding this division. Both divisions bloodied and battered from July 1st. Okay, we've established that. Okay, we don't need to get any further into that. That is 2/3 of the attacking force.
Yes.
And the other third is fresh, relatively speaking.
Yep.
I'm sure they're tired from marching. But
and that's a good point. I mean, because we often forget about that. They've done a lot of marching in from the Chambersburg area, but they haven't seen the combat. And so initially, when Lee was talking about what's the plan going to be for today, and we were talking about this plan A, plan B, and all of that stuff, initially there was talk about Hood and McLaws participating in this again with Pickett. But, again, Longstreet justifiably convinces the high command that, look, Hood and McLaws are shot up and I need a flank. If they're in motion, I don't have a flank, which will come in handy later in the afternoon when Kilpatrick's cavalry shows up. But Pickett, Pickett's guys, for lack of a better word, are the spearhead in the attack because they're the fresh ones. Yeah. But I don't ever treat, particularly Pettigrew, because they're in the front line with Pickett. I don't ever treat Pettigrew like support. They are equally as important.
Right.
They are half of that front line attack.
So there's a 800-something yard gap between the right of the Pettigrew-Trimble column and the left of Pickett's division or something. I don't know if it's 800 yards. I don't know where I got that number, but I think I made it up.
Half a
not
mile.
your book.
Yeah.
But there's a big gap that they have to close.
But
that Pickett has to close.
Yeah, not necessarily a huge gap, but it's a gap. And you're right. So if you sort of think about it, if you go out today to the the Tennessee State Memorial, but because Fry's guys are from Alabama and Tennessee. But if you go out to the Tennessee State Memorial, which I think today is a little bit too far kind of over to what would be their left or the north. But if you go out to that monument today and you kind of then work your way towards the Virginia Monument, there's a fence. There's a fence line that kind of then runs towards Cemetery Ridge. I think that fence line is roughly what would have been Fry's right.
Oh, wow.
And so the key on this, if I could, is really going to be Fry is going to be told, hey, go over to Pickett's side, talk to Pickett, see who is going to dress on who. Dress meaning what is the point of direction. Well, they go over there and they kind of decide, hey, Garnett and Fry are going to dress on each other, which basically has to close the gap, but is going to then push that line, dress meaning direction, straight towards Cemetery Ridge or the area we know today as the high water mark. Why, in my mind, is that significant? These guys are not directed to Cemetery Hill. And by some fire directed us, or we got confused over Ziegler's Grove and the cops, or some nonsense like that. The direction they are going is straight in towards Cemetery Ridge.
That's a really good point, because if Cemetery Hill was the goal, Pickett's division would have continued at an oblique.
Right.
Yeah.
So in other words, because here's the thing, Pettigrew and Trimble have less distance to cover to the Union line. And they're going straight. Shortest distance between 2 points is what? A straight line.
Right.
Yeah.
And they already have a short distance.
We learned that at Gettysburg too. Yes.
I learned everything in Gettysburg. So Pettigrew theoretically is going to get to the Emittsburg Road at least first. And so that means he's going to make contact with the main line first, because it's going to take them longer to do this oblique. And it's several, it's straight ahead, oblique, straight ahead, oblique, right? And there's never a point where they, because if to my point, if Cemetery Hill was the goal, Pickett's division would have probably just wheeled and gone straight northeast or whatever, while Pettigrew is going forward, bloodying the nose, and then Pickett comes in and kicks him in the side. But they're not doing that. They can't do that.
Yes. And I agree with you. When you do the alignment, let's go back to Pettigrew and Trimble for a minute. You have Pettigrew in the front line. You have Trimble's two brigades behind Pettigrew. They are behind Pettigrew's right. Okay? They're not behind the left. Now, I would think, look, I'm no military general. I'm no military genius. I just play one on podcasts. I would think if we're directing that attack to Cemetery Hill, I'm putting the weight of that my strength on the left. Opposite Cemetery Hill. And they don't do that. And back to the Brockenbrough point, and again, whatever we think of that brigade, they are the smallest one. They are one of the weakest ones on the field. Would you really put them in Davis opposite the objective while all the other ones are further down the line?
And not include Rhodes' division in the plan. Rhodes' division is next in line.
Exactly. They're in the north lane. Yeah.
And why they're right across from Cemetery Hill. Why would they not do that?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so we have just completely blown that whole idea of it being Cemetery Hill out of the water.
Well, it's a pervasive idea, and I'm pleased to come back to it again and again during the course of our time.
Let's do it, because sometimes you have to really drag people. Not drag people. You have to really ram the point home.
I have given up trying to explain this to people on Facebook. I tried, and it was just, could I do a dramatic reading from a passage?
Please.
By Armstead Long, who is Lee's military secretary.
Would you like some music?
Sure, sure.
How dramatic are you getting?
No, I'm not going to get that
dramatic. Oh, all right. Well, go ahead.
All right. This is from Lee's military secretary, Armstead Long.
Okay.
And he writes this in the 1880s about what was the objective. There was a weak point upon which an attack could be made with a reasonable prospect of success. This was where the ridge, sloping westward, formed the depression through which the Emittsburg Road passes. Perceiving that by forcing the Federal lines at that point and turning towards Cemetery Hill, the right could be taken in flank, the remainder would be neutralized. General Lee determined to attack at that point. Long is describing what we just said. Mm-hmm. And folks, I've developed a catchphrase in the last year or so when you talk about the charge. It's not about trees. It's not about the copse of trees versus Ziegler's Grove. Yeah. It's not about trees. It was never about trees. But the battle over, they mistook Ziegler's. They were on the field for 2 days, and yet somehow they mistook Ziegler's Grove for the copse of trees. That ridiculous argument needs to be put to bed because it was never about trees. It was about finding what they thought was a weak point in the Union line on Cemetery Ridge. Mm-hmm. And look, you can say, well, Armstead Long's account is bullshit like everything else, but it's consistent with what we just said. It's consistent with how Longstreet deploys the weight of the attack on the field and how they dress or are directed. Cemetery Ridge was the target. Now, Long said we would then turn towards Cemetery Hill, so you Cemetery Hill enthusiasts are not left out of the party either. But that, in my view, and Wayne agrees, and I think nobody in this country knows more about the Pickett-Pettigrew-Trimble charge than Wayne Motts. Wayne and I are in agreement on that. That's the objective.
Mm-hmm. The copse of trees. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, okay. Must we?
Well, I want to get an idea. Was that stated as a focal point prior to the charge, or is that something in hindsight that someone said? Like, in other words, well, we were heading towards that copse of trees there.
Right.
So, and then it became, that was the objective.
So formally, there's nothing in writing directing anything to any trees, the copse of trees. You look at Lee's report, you look at Longstreet's report, the surviving reports from guys in Pickett's division, you see nothing about trees or those trees. Is it plausible that if I am commanding a regiment or a brigade on that side of the line and I need something to direct towards, is it plausible that, with the projectiles and the spokes, somebody go for the trees, boys?
Sure.
Absolutely, that's plausible, but that doesn't make that the objective of the attack.
It has no military significance.
It has no military significance on that. And then we know the whole story about Bachelder and, everything that develops around that later.
Speaking of Bachelder, another person who is very, very knowledgeable about the Battle of Gettysburg, and if the park will ever test him, is about to be in your ranks as a guide. The great 6 questions Lentz.
Yes.
He has a question for us on the phone.
Already had it. Well, we did.
Well, that was
more.
That's right. He's got 5 more, plus the 6 that he submitted.
I have 4 more questions.
Oh, God.
That was a 2-parter. Yeah, we'll hold them to 2.
All right, Mikey, go ahead. What do you got?
Well, thank you again for answering my questions, no matter how many I have. But my question concerns this on the other side of the attack. Wilcox and Lang, you already talked about how Mahone and Posey are also of Anderson's division, but they're not the ones going forward. Instead, it's going to be Lang and Wilcox, who were heavily engaged on July 2nd.
Yep.
What went into that decision, and how was that decision made?
Good question. Even without the headset on, I could still hear that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That means I'm going to go deaf because mine are up really loud.
Yeah, we had a debate, folks, before we went on about me not wearing a headset. But Wilcox and Lang, they are an often forgotten, an often overlooked part of the attack. And I would argue one of the most tragic parts of the attack. Those guys should not be in here for any good reason.
Right.
As I think I heard Mike say, they have fought over that same ground along the Emittsburg Road Ridge and beyond. They fought over much of that same ground on July 2nd, suffered casualties, saw what was in front of them, and they are more or less doing the same thing on July 3rd. One of the biggest problems with this attack is the ability to protect the flanks. Now, Lee said in his report that one of the things he wanted to do to protect the flanks was have batteries move forward, but that doesn't happen. But what happens with Wilcox and Lang is one of Pickett's staff officers will come over to Longstreet and basically say, hey, look, General Pickett, my compliments. General Pickett needs support on his flank. According to the story, Longstreet is, he's not in good humor that day. We know that. But according to this officer, Captain Bright, according to Captain Bright's particular story, Longstreet has been talking to Colonel Fremantle. We all know, the teacup. We all know Fremantle.
Sure.
Longstreet has just basically said to Fremantle, the charge has failed. I don't want to be here. The charge has failed. Just as he said that, the staff officer comes up looking for support. Longstreet says to Captain Bright, didn't you just hear what I told Colonel Fremantle? Go tell General Pickett it's failed. Well, what do you do if you're like the cat? Well, yes, sir, I'll do that. Yeah. But before Captain Bright leaves, Longstreet kind of goes, whoa, wait a minute. I was just joking, kid. Wait a minute. You see Wilcox's brigade over there? Go tell him to go in and he will protect Pickett's right flank. So in some histories of the attack, they portray Wilcox and Lang as sort of this pre-planned protection of Pickett's right flank. I'm not so sure that's true. I think, Longstreet sends somebody over and says, hey, we need support. Wilcox says, I know. He gets going. He's about 20 minutes behind Pickett at this point. So, yes, the brigade on Pickett's right is Kemper. Kemper is obliqued towards Cemetery Ridge, but in the smoke, the noise, the confusion, Wilcox and Lang just go straight in. So they're going straight in. They're not even anywhere near Kemper's right flank. And these guys are going to get hammered and primarily by Freeman McGilvery's artillery.
Yeah.
Some of Stannard's guys will swing around later and shoot him up in the flank. And that combination will, and I think it's Alexander who says something like, we were just looking at these guys like, what are they even moving forward to support at this point?
Yeah.
And it's just,
it's
a total waste.
So they're supposed to support the right flank, but they don't.
Right.
And then in doing so, they're not supported. They're like an island.
Yeah, by themselves.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're all out there, and then they're heading straight at an artillery brigade line.
Yeah.
Wild.
It's great.
Wild stuff.
It's wild stuff.
Wild stuff.
You are correct, sir.
When you are crossing that ground and you get to that point where you fully appreciate where McGilvery's guns are.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's just a very stark experience.
It's a great example of the terrain.
Yeah.
Because, if you look at it on a map or you just look at it, but you get down there, the Cadore Trussell thicket area, there's briars and it's marshy in parts. It's just, man, to be stomping across that ground under fire 2 days in a row.
Right.
You gotta give Wilcox and Lang some credit.
Yeah, you're right. This is 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
Same ground.
Yeah.
So they know the ground, but
it doesn't help them.
Doesn't matter.
It should make it feel worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
God, yeah. So it really, and again, like I hear stuff like that, and of course, we always focus on Pickett's division and to a lesser extent Pettigrew and Trimble, and I just shake my head at what a waste of human life that is.
Yeah.
But I don't go so far as to say, oh, Lee's just wasting I wouldn't do that.
Right.
Like, I understand why he came to that decision. And I mean, really the whole move to invade the North was a desperate move.
It's a risk. It's all a risk.
It's all like this entire thing is a gamble.
Yep.
So it might as well go all in. Like, it's like, I don't know. That's the thing. Like, you take Gettysburg and you look at just Gettysburg and everything that happened at Gettysburg. And you can make whatever decisions or conclusions that you have on the whole thing, but zoom out.
Yeah.
And he comes up here in a desperate situation. They need stuff. Their government can't provide it. They need supplies. They need food. They need animals. They need everything. And they're stealing it. That's really what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they get into this battle, which is a big, huge mess for them. The whole thing is just out of desperation, in my mind, at least.
Well, you're right. And I would use the term, the whole thing is a big risk. And Robert E. Lee, at this point in the war, is a risk taker. Mm-hmm. And it does all tie together. Confidence, maybe you underestimate your opponent. Lee says in his report, considering the favorable results that would ensue from defeating the Union Army on Union soil, because a lot of people have, I think, in recent years, it's become sexy for a lot of us to just sort of characterize this as a supply raid. Lee is just up here for the supplies. He does say in his report favorable results that would ensue from beating these guys on northern soil. So it's supply and it's military. He's putting a lot on the table.
Yeah.
And, and look, as we've said, we know in hindsight, the July 3rd attack is not a good idea. Robert E. Lee's not a dunk. Corey, what was the phrase you used earlier when we were talking about Brockenbrough? They've done it and I haven't, or something like that. I mean, we criticize the hell out of Robert E. Lee for July 3rd. Ultimately, he envisioned something in his mind that didn't come out anywhere close to that in the execution.
Right.
We would hope.
And, the Army commander, that too. But the Army commander isn't ultimately responsible for the execution. Operational control of the attack is under Longstreet, and he's in a tough spot because we know he thinks this is a terrible idea, but he's still got to figure out how to make it work.
On that point, Longstreet, actually, Mike, do you have anything else?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think one here is
okay.
It's more of a comment, so this is more like a politician's question.
Okay.
And so what I would say here is, I think looking at what information Lee has, and that he has one fresh division that has not been committed, and he has all that artillery, he has one move left to make. I would, with the information he has, put yourself in his shoes, people who are looking at this from 160 years later. Put yourself in his shoes. And with all the information that he has, that we think he knows, we know he has, and I would ask you, how many of you would also commit that charge? It's a very tempting thing. And especially when the track record of that army has been, he has asked them to do the militarily impossible on multiple occasions, including at Chancellorsville, dividing his army multiple times. Again, going on a great tour with Jim Hessler about Chancellorsville.
Thank you, Mike.
Opened my eyes to this. He asked them to do this over and over, and they have come through. So it's easy for us to say it's a terrible idea, knowing what the outcome was. But with the information they have, it looks like it could probably work if the right things happen.
Well, when he asked Mike, when he asked them to do it before in Virginia, did he have a trusted subordinate say, "Hey, man, I don't think this is going to work," or did his trusted subordinate say, "Yes, sir," and go ahead and do it?
Well, not to my knowledge, but then again, these instances of where he does like frontal assaults, like at Gaines Mill, and at Malvern Hill. And then you look at what he does at Chancellorsville. He has to kind of overlook McLaws a little bit. But for the most part, he doesn't have someone pushing back necessarily on him.
And the scale of those were bigger than Pickett's charge.
Except maybe a second Bull Run.
Right. And
second Bull Run, I think Longstreet causes him to pause to attack the next day, which ends up working. So...
Yeah, and the only reason I ask is because if you're used to everybody saying yes and going forward and doing it and succeeding, and then finally you have somebody go, I don't know, you say, put yourself in his shoes. Putting myself in his shoes, when I have a trusted subordinate or friend or whoever say to me, wait, I don't know, Matt. And when they're usually like, yeah, okay. That's where I'll go, oh, okay, well, wait a minute. That will unnerve me. Someone who's always with me suddenly going, I don't know. Now I'm like, well, okay, so let me just think a little longer. Hold on. So that's why I asked.
And one last thing. The maps and the book are fantastic. They were useful in studying for the exam, that Pickett's charge book. I think one of the things that opened my eyes was looking at Garnett's brigade and where they started, and then following their path up, and you get up to that post and rail fence, because when you're down that point of woods, you can't really see Cemetery Ridge. But when you get up at that post and rail fence in the middle of the field there, you see everything.
Yeah. You are so exposed.
If you can see everything, they can see you.
Oh.
And I think I audibly went, oh, no.
Yeah, I had a sinking,
when I saw that.
A sinking feeling when I hit that point. It was just, I just had nowhere else on the field did I feel like I was a complete sitting duck.
There is no more visceral experience at Gettysburg today than still walking Pickett's charge.
Absolutely.
Nothing beats it. Nothing beats it on any Civil War battle.
And you've done it hundreds, perhaps thousands of times, and it still gets you.
Yeah, yeah. And I always say the day I give up my license is the day I can't physically walk that charge anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is. And that particular point that you're talking about, Mike, I forgot, didn't we do a tour there with Lewis, or was that Matt Atkinson? I think we did a couple tours based off.
Lewis.
That was Lewis. Yeah. And then I think like early on in the Get Out of the Car tour history there, we did one with Matt Atkinson. And we followed Garnett's path. And that part there, coming up over that first rise, and when you hit, I don't know if it's his first oblique or one of his obliques, where he's in a swale, but the swale is like a perfect like bowling alley right to McGilvery's line.
Yeah.
And they take him in the flank there, and that's another one of those like holy crap positions there. And really, folks who've never done this, when you come to Gettysburg, you have to walk Pickett's charge. There's more than one way to do it. Jim will take you out, right?
I sure will.
So you can hire Jim. He'll take you. It is, and you know what? Don't even talk, Jim, right? Just let them soak it in and then talk on the way back.
Talk on the way back.
Yeah. Just let them take it all in.
The old half-price store.
Hey, look, the customer is the boss. If they don't want me to talk, I will talk.
I'm telling you, folks, you have to do it and just kind of get there and commune with the spirits, or do whatever the hell you do, because you got to just. It is, and we've all been out there countless times, and it still gets us every time.
It does.
I try not to overdo it because I don't want it to not ever get me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
But you're doing it thousands of times. Maybe it'll always get me then. Because if you can do it and it still gets you, then I guess so. Okay. Is that it, Mike?
I'm good.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for the call, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
717-420-1978 is the phone number if you want to call in.
Yeah.
And so Longstreet.
Yes.
What is your take on the whole, Longstreet dawdled and, dragged his heels and was moping? And
I don't think he dawdled, moped, or dragged his heels. And I think.
What about pouted? Do you think he pouted?
Maybe a little pouting, maybe a little. Look, I think it's not very sexy to criticize Longstreet these days. The ebb and the flow of history.
Yeah.
At one time, it was sexy to bash Meade. It was sexy to bash Longstreet. Now you kind of get lynched if history changes. Today, we are much more empathetic to what Meade went through. We're much more empathetic to what Longstreet had to deal with. I certainly, looking at the results, is Gettysburg Longstreet's best 2 days? No, he has better battles than this. Whether you want to, Jim, that's not Longstreet's fault. That was Lee's, half-ass plan, whatever. But I do. Even his own staff officers said, look, at Gettysburg, there was something lacking in his bearing, that usual fire, a little more apathy in his movements. And I'm not here to do a Longstreet take on that. I don't think he's dragging his feet. I don't think he's certainly too good of a soldier to let his men get killed because he's sulking or pouting. He's not doing any of that. But if the Wilcox-Lang moment is true, the story we told a few minutes ago about Captain Bright, the staff officer, if moments like that are true, you can ask yourself, and it's okay to ask, folks, even though we all love old Pete, you can ask yourself, is that usual attention to detail there on July 3rd? Moments like that, obviously, maybe not.
Right. What do you attribute that to?
Well, there's certainly the lack of enthusiasm for the plan. There's certainly that, but I think again, and we sort of keep coming back to this sort of example, managing a Civil War battle is a lot harder than looking at the map on your screen and saying, move the orange bar here.
Yeah.
The communication, the staff work, the intangibles we can never recreate. How exhausted physically or mentally is a Longstreet or is anybody else that might be affecting your cognitive decision making? There are all those sorts of factors that I think could play into it.
All right. The audience has been waiting with bated breath for us to get into the charge itself. Okay. And let me tell you something. That bated breath smells sweet. So let's do that for them. Right. Okay, let's get to the charge. So let's get the soldiers a marching across the field. Well, actually, you want to talk about the cannonade first?
I do, because I think. Oh, Gord got his finger up.
If I may, Matthew Gillespie sent another super chat, and I think
thank you, Matthew.
He brings up a good point that sets the stage here. People often forget in the summer of 1863, the Confederacy was desperate. They were losing in Vicksburg. The economy was struggling. The blockade was taking its toll. And Lee,
needs to do something big.
He says Lee had to gamble, and I think in context, that's, what's in Lee's mind.
Yeah.
Agree.
I need to win.
Agree. No arguments there. No arguments there.
All right, go ahead.
The artillery. Yeah, we haven't talked about the artillery, and that's ironic because I think really the artillery is the most important part of it all. Lee, as we already mentioned, the fact that Lee wants artillery to move forward with the infantry to protect the flanks. But even before the infantry moves forward, the great cannonade, we talk about the cannonade was not intended to be this massive 2-hour bombardment. But what Lee is hoping, and one of the things that encouraged Lee to do this in the first place, was he thought the artillery positions gained by Longstreet from July 2nd, the Peach Orchard, the Emittsburg Road Ridge line, Lee thought those artillery positions could be brought to bear on the target point and would, in Lee's view, and this is again an area where we know in hindsight he was wrong, but Lee thought we could converge fire onto the enemy's position, onto Cemetery Ridge, onto Cemetery Hill, drive off the enemy artillery, and that would be a big reason why the assault would succeed. So when you go out there next time and you look across that mile of open ground and you shake your head and say, what was that old man thinking? That old man was thinking, my artillery will blow the other guy's artillery off the field, and the infantry will, for 3/4 of that mile, have a clear ground to cross. The overestimation of the artillery is, in my opinion, and I think in Lee's opinion, the biggest reason why the day fails.
Yeah.
So how many guns do you guys in the book have combined, Union and Confederate?
Yeah, so to be blunt, I forget the number we came up with in the book, but what it roughly is, give or take, it's about 75 guns. And Matt's searching through for the answer in the book now. Give or take now, it's 75 under Alexander. It's 60 to 70-ish under A.P. Hill's guys on northern Cemetery Ridge. You've got maybe another 20 or so from Ewell engaged up around Oak Hill and in Benner's Hill. So all in, you could be talking as many as, and I'll use a round number, as many as 150 all in. Now, the problem is most of those guns do not converge onto Cemetery Ridge from multiple directions. Many of those guns are parallel to the Cemetery Ridge position. So there's no great advantage to be gained. They're just blasting away at each other.
Yeah.
And on the north side of town and on the north side of the battlefield, one of the problems you run into is there really does not turn out to be any great positions put to use by Ewell. You know, some guns up around Oak Hill, as far away as the Peace Light, participated in that cannonade. But to really get critical mass onto the Union position, they don't really have the positions on the north side of town to take advantage of that.
I'm not finding the number of guns. There's a lot of numbers I'm seeing, and of course that gets my brain all crazy. But I can't find the number. of guns.
We'll look in the commercial.
Yeah, we'll look.
But you know, again, give or take, all in, it's 150. Now, not all those 150 are on Seminary Ridge. Seminary Ridge is probably closer to 125-ish. But all in, I'm talking all the way around the field, somewhere around 150.
Now, today, when you're driving down Confederate Avenue and you see all the batteries neatly arrayed along the road, that is a misrepresentation of where they actually were.
Yes.
They would have been out in the field, not along where the road is, because some of them make no sense,
right?
Because they're down on like the opposite side of a ridge.
Yeah, if you literally go and stand where they are today, you
can't see anything.
You have no field of fire whatsoever.
Just randomly shoot in the air, boys.
Yeah.
But so there are none in the peach orchard, but there were during the battle.
Yep. And then running kind of in an arc from the peach orchard along the Emittsburg Road by the Sherfy property, and then kind of going back onto an angle to the Point of Woods. And again, there's no guns there today, with one or two exceptions. There's no guns there today representing that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's just one thing, and that's mainly what was that mainly due to the property that they could get at the time to put the batteries, or is that because they didn't want Confederate units on Union lines, or does it have more to do with the tour route, or?
Well, I'll tell when I first started coming out here, I have a vague, not a vague, I have a clear remembrance when I first started coming to Gettysburg that there were artillery pieces along the Emmitsburg Road.
Union artillery pieces? No,
Confederate on the west side of the road, west side of the Emmitsburg Road, pointing toward up around the Sherfy property.
Okay.
Right? Help me out, folks.
I don't
if
remember.
I'm wrong on this, dial in.
I mean, you're substantially older than I am.
Well,
so you would've...
I'm substantially more experienced. But there were artillery, and when they started taking them in. Now, this was years and years ago, but when they started taking them in for maintenance, a lot of those guns never came back. Yeah,
wow. I don't remember there
John
being...
Heiser listening. Yeah. John, call in, tell us or something. So
that is interesting. I'd like to know where they were. Like, you talking like where Stuckey's would have been, or
past that. So kind of if you're doing one of your drive-abouts from the Peach Orchard towards town, Sherfy is on your left. Yeah. You're coming up kind of in that corridor between Sherfy and Klingel, on the west side of the road. I cannot be the only one who remembers this.
Well, we'll look for the comments and see if anybody else remembers this. So far, nobody does.
Not like I've been coming here for 70 years. Come on, folks, help out. Gary, is Edelman out there? Is Edelman still watching?
I think he fell asleep.
Probably.
Yeah. So
does he ever fall asleep?
I don't know. He's got to sleep sometime, right?
No.
You don't think so? All right. So cannonades going on.
Yes.
Now, roughly around this time, before, after Custer kicks Stuart's ass. When?
Yeah, so, we generally time the cannonades starting a little bit after 1 o'clock, kind of ending before 3 o'clock. During all of that time, the action is going on at East Cavalry Field, but the grand charge at East Cavalry Field, the last Custer versus Wade Ham, probably around 3 o'clock.
Okay.
So,
roughly around the same time,
Pickett
a little
and
after.
Custer, same time. Which is one of the reasons why people say, "Oh, it was coordinated." But I think that's just luck.
It just happenstance.
I think it just happens.
There's nothing to this idea. We've talked about this before on other shows, but let's mention it here because not everybody goes back and listens to old shows. There was an old tale that Stuart going around the Union, which would have been the Union right, but he's on the Confederate left, was an effort to get behind the Union line so that when Pickett broke through, they could sandwich the center of the Union line.
Don't think there's any truth to that whatsoever. There's no contemporary evidence to support that. Some of that came in from participants and Stuart staff officers and such later on. No contemporary evidence to support it. And again, if you know the field, it just feels impractical. Impracticable. Right? It just feels impractical.
There's no logistical
way to support that,
right.
coordinate that.
I would love. We should do something. Someday on that, because if you just drive that route that he would have had to take with the roads that existed at the time, right?
I did this morning.
Did you? Thinking of this or just like driving it?
Taking the little one to school out that way.
Okay.
But I follow the roads back all the time, trying to take different roads, get different perspectives, and I just can't. I don't.
And think about this. Lee does not start the day saying, well, at 3 p.m. we will have Pickett's charge.
Yeah.
So Stuart's all these, 4 miles away.
Yeah.
There's no way Stuart and Hampton are going to say, okay, it's 3 o'clock.
Right.
It's 3 o'clock, Charlotte time, come on out of the woods. There's not even a coordination, even ignoring the distance and the inability to communicate. There's nothing in the planning stage that has these two pieces coming together.
Yeah. Right.
We'll attack at 3. You be there at 3:30. There's none of that.
Yeah.
Our friend Estella Beard remembers the cannons.
Thank Estella. Get me on camera. Well, Stella, thank you.
She and Glenn.
Bravo. And Glenn, too. Bravo. I'm not going to blow a kiss at Glenn. Bravo.
Oh, Glenn.
Bravo.
Glenn, buddy.
All right, go ahead. Court, you got some...
yes.
We don't want to get past these.
Our friend Eric has read accounts where the cannonade could be heard miles and miles away. Are there civilian accounts describing what it sounded like in the town?
Ooh.
Oh yeah, there would be. A continuous roar, the ground shook, and that sort of thing. I'm trying to think. I don't have Michael Jacobs' account here in front of me. Jacobs is one of the best civilian accounts I go to for the. I don't recall if he would have described it at all, but yeah, I'm sure. Jenny Wade, Tilly. Well, not Jenny.
Oh, not Jenny Wade.
sorry. But Tilly Pierce and the like. Oh my heavens, mother! They're going to kill us all. I'm sure that was all. Get Tim Smith on for the civilian stuff.
Right. The local crap, as Gary calls it.
Yeah, the local craps.
I think there's one story about somebody who was deaf. They were in the basement of a house, and they signed to the people in the family that one was close or something like they could feel it, and he could tell how close they were based on the strength of the concussion,
the concussion
that he was feeling.
Death by concussion.
Yeah.
Death by concussion. Yeah.
I was in a band in high school, and one of the girls in the high school came up to me one day, and she's like, "Hey, would you and your band want to play at this function that my parents' nonprofit has?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "They'll pay you like $100." And we're like, "Oh my God." And we were 3-piece, so it's $33 a piece, right? Wow.
That was in the 70s, so $33.
That was a lot of money. Get you like 2 tanks of gas, night at the diner, and a movie. So we're all excited about it. And I was like, "Do they want to hear an audition tape or something?" She goes, "No, they're deaf." And I was like, They're like, it's a deaf people's organization, and they just have an annual banquet or something. And they're like, you could play as loud as you want because they dance from the vibrations.
Oh,
and I was like, okay, that's awesome. We could play. Yeah. We called it the Deaf Comedy Jam, and that was the best show we ever did, and we forgot to hit record on the camera.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
What was the other one, Mr. Gutty?
Mr. Gutty, what role does Pendleton play in the Confederate cannonade? Is there tension between him and Alexander? And did this potentially contribute to the bombardment lasting much longer than planned? So it's a 3-parter.
Yeah. So I think, so for anybody who doesn't know, Pendleton is the chief of artillery in the Army of Northern Virginia. Pendleton, in his report, is very laudatory of Alexander. So Edward Porter Alexander has essentially been selected by Longstreet to manage the 1st Corps artillery today. And Pendleton in his report is again, very complimentary to all the efforts that Alexander is putting into it and that sort of thing. But, there probably are some communication lapses, which again, I think are problematic along the line, frankly, on both sides of the field. You have, for example, that famous instance where Alexander says we held back somewhere between 7 and 9 howitzers. In some of his writings, he says 7, and others, I think he says 9. But we held back some howitzers, and then without telling me, Pendleton moved them. So when the time came for me to get the howitzers to move forward, we couldn't find them. So I don't know if I would call it tension between the two. I don't think there's any sort of, and again, Alexander's lieutenant colonel. If General Pendleton comes up and says, I need you, sir, yes, sir. Mm-hmm. We have always questioned the competence of Pendleton. And you could certainly argue, could Pendleton be more of a Henry Hunt and be more active in managing what's going on? If I read Pendleton's report during the cannonade, Pendleton does say he's kind of going up and down the line observing things, but you're really leaving the management to this kid, Alexander. Mm-hmm. So,
but is his job the same as Hunt's?
In theory, I mean, yes and no, because as you know, the organization is different.
Yeah.
In the Army of the Potomac, you have an army-wide artillery reserve, which you don't have in the Army of Northern Virginia.
Right.
In the Army of Northern Virginia,
and Pendleton is at Army level.
Right. Yeah. Pendleton's at Army level, and in the Army of Northern Virginia, essentially all of the artillery is within the Corps division and so on and so forth. So Pendleton doesn't have any direct autonomy off of a reserve
right.
or anything like that. And he is in essence an administrator.
Yeah. So if he were to try to order a artillery battalion or a battery to do something, that order has to go through several people before it gets to...
in theory, right? So in theory, it's got to go through...
in a normal circumstance. Yeah.
I would argue, kind of going back to the other example, I would argue that if you're captain, whatever, commanding a battery, and General Pendleton comes up to you and says, hey, we need you over here.
Sure.
You're going to do it. But it's not ideal. And here's an example with the howitzers. So Pendleton makes the executive decision to move the howitzers. He either doesn't or doesn't feel like he needs to tell anybody. And so then when Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel Alexander's looking for him, he can't find him. So that's a good example why, yes, he can probably do whatever the hell he wants, but you really don't want to do it.
So there were guns that were supposed to follow the attack, but they never did.
Right.
Okay. All right. So continue, or
should we? So at this point,
do you want to get to the infantry?
Should we get to the infantry?
All right. Let's get to the infantry.
So the cannonade, by most accounts, runs about 2 hours. Most people watching kind of know that. By Alexander's accounts, he did not expect it to go on for 2 hours. And of course, as the cannonade is going on, it's really left to Alexander to determine when has the opportunity arisen to bring the infantry forward. Mm-hmm. So this is another reason why it's not coordinated with Jeb Stuart. It's Lee to Longstreet to Alexander. Alexander has some momentous latitude to say, I think we've had the desired effect, bring the infantry forward now. Now, we could go on with this all night. I'll shorthand it. I mean, for various reasons, it's not till approaching probably 2:30 or later that Alexander does not see the cannonade having any desired effect. Finally, though, he thinks he sees some guns being drawn off Cemetery Ridge, Cemetery Hill. He sends the note to Longstreet and Pickett saying, for God's sakes, come forward now. And so it's somewhere about 3:00 in the afternoon. The infantry steps forward and begins that march to destiny. Mm-hmm. Pickett gives the order down his line. So Kemper's brigade is moving forward on Pickett's right. Garnett is moving forward kind of on a line parallel with Kemper. And then really behind Garnett is Armstead. Mm-hmm. And, they're moving forward. We've already talked about their need to oblique to kind of get into the target. Pettigrew steps off basically at the same time, Trimble behind them. Again, we've kind of already talked about the need of Pettigrew and Garnett to direct and connect with each other. So we've kind of already talked about that. You guys all know it's less than a mile of open, undulating ground. We've already covered that. The thing, though, is as they're moving across the undulating ground, and we can imagine the tramp of the footsteps in the tall grass because we have failed to suppress the Union artillery. Boom! Here comes the shells and the projectiles, and they start taking shots and casualties all the way across the ground.
Yeah. The ones that were able to get up. How many do you think actually remained behind from sunstroke?
You know, when we did the book, we tried to apply some math and some science guesstimates to it. There is no way to know. You know, nobody says that. Nobody ever breaks that down. We we looked at accounts. There clearly are accounts saying that it happened, but we have no way of knowing the precise number. So when we did this in the book, we kind of did some 10% haircut estimates, 6 guys in this company, 10 guys in that company. And it can, as you get through every company and every regiment and every brigade, it can add up to a couple hundred guys. Yeah. And that's probably not unreasonable.
And then also they're taking casualties from the bombardment.
Right.
So whatever they were starting with, they're not moving forward with.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So they move forward. They're on their way. They're under fire. That's where you left off.
Yeah. So they're taking fire. They're approaching the Emittsburg Road. They drive back any Union skirmishers from that point. Kemper's right is getting hit, from artillery all the way from Little Round Top. Mm-hmm. They're crossing in front of McGilvery's front. This is before Wilcox and line come forward. So they're taking artillery fire from McGilvery's line. Over on the left, Pettigrew and Trimble are coming, straight in towards the northern end of Cemetery Ridge and part of Cemetery Hill. They're getting hammered by artillery fire from Osborne's 11th Corps Artillery on Cemetery Hill. Brockenbraugh's brigade, by all accounts, breaks first. Yeah. And look, again, you have to filter that. They're Virginians in a heavily North Carolina brigade. For whatever reason, Virginian, or, I don't get into that Virginia, North Carolina bullshit, but those people do. Mm-hmm. But by all accounts, by the lack of casualties, by the fact that none of their flags are captured, almost everyone agrees Brockenbraugh's guys break and fall back when they get not far past Long Lane. Yeah. And so what that does is that is now putting the left end of this whole attack teetering on the brink of destruction. Yeah. Because as they get to the Emmitsburg Road now, you can now get units like the 8th Ohio and other units like that come out of the line and then change front and are now firing into what would be Davis's left flank. Mm-hmm. So Davis is struggling. Meanwhile, back on the other end of the field, Stannard's guys come out and they're firing into Kemper's right flank. So, the whole attack at this point is enveloped on both sides. And whether they realized it or not, and I would argue many of them maybe still not realize it, defeat is officially in progress at this point. Yeah. But, there's still accounts still talk about enthusiasm and we can do it. That line in the movie where Kemper comes up to Armistead and says, goddamn Low, they're firing into us. You got to come up and help me. The real version of that line seems to be Kemper saying, we're going to take the ridge. Are you going to come up and help us? And Armistead's got the hat on the sword and says, look at my guys. They look great. Yeah. So I think at least at some levels, there's still that Southern charm, confidence, whatever you want to call it. This is, we can do this. I don't think it looks as one-sided as we envision it. I really don't.
Where do you think they start taking heavy casualties?
I do think heavy casualties at the Emmitsburg Road. Yeah. Part of that, again, is the target density. As you get to the road, as you're trying to break down fences, climb over fences, get through fence openings, whatever you want to call it.
Rifled weapon range.
You're in the range of the muskets.
Well, you are. And, one of the things we did on the maps and the books is we put we kind of called it like the cone of death. Like these pink sort of triangular things.
Let's see if I can find it.
And I'll tell you, at one of our earliest book talks, some reenactor on YouTube said, well, leave it to another Park Service employee who doesn't know the range of the rifled musket. Oh, yes, we do. By the way, we're not Park Service employees. And oh, yes, we do know the range of the rifle. And you are in range when you get to the Emmitsburg Road.
Damn right you are.
It doesn't mean you could hit an individual target, but you could hit massed bodies in these dense targets.
I love when the old saying, when ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise,
Exactly,
shows itself like that.
Right.
I'm not finding your cone of death yet, but
it would be in one of the later maps as we kind of get to the heartbreaking climax here.
So I might have passed it. Okay, so Emmitsburg Road, and they're getting stopped up by the fences and everything. How the Emmitsburg Road today? You go driving on it, it's pretty level in most spots, or not too far different from the ground on either side of it, right?
Right.
But it was a dirt road, or was it macadamized?
No, the Emmitsburg Road would have been dirt.
Okay.
And there was a sunken nature from wagons coming up and down, and I would imagine very rutted and such by the in Trimble's guys in particular. Trimble's guys in particular talk about the difficulty they had in getting over the road. Pickett's division, in whatever number, that's the whole topic of contention. How many get over the road? How many don't? Pickett's division, in some mass, do get across the Emmitsburg Road. I think most of Pettigrew's guys get across the Emmitsburg Road. Trimble later acknowledges, hey, I did what I could, but I couldn't really get my guys to get beyond the road. Maybe because they were in a second line, they kind of said, "Oh, this is lost at this point." But a lot of them do get across the road and make that final push to the stone wall.
So the number I always hear about the men that make it over the wall with Armistead is around 200.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I do agree.
And I think when we talked about this a few years ago when you came on the show, I think I asked you how many of Pickett's men, or maybe it was all of them, I don't remember. I want to say Pickett's men. Once they crossed the Emmitsburg Road, between the road and the wall, how many men do you think got into that area? I think you put the number around 1,500 or so.
Did I? I mean, it would have been a total guess.
Yeah. It was a guess.
Yeah. Before my time, there was a big debate on this. Before my time, John Michael Priest came out with the book. I think he kind of speculated most of them did not get that far and went back. I'm not going to mention any friends, but there were some friends of mine who hotly disagreed with that and said most of them got across the road. What you have the accounts of masses of Confederate troops getting to the stone wall, a couple hundred getting over the stone wall. You have the Elliott burial map, which shows maybe as many as 500 kind of buried in that vicinity. Yeah. So, I don't know, it's 2,000, whatever the number you want to make it to
He's
be.
got a plot of 500 some at one point, and then 100 and some at another point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like a...
So, the only...
His numbers seem odd in some ways, though, don't they?
Like his Rosewoods numbers.
Oh, God. Those are... He's like 900 guys buried in the Rocky Woods.
Yeah, more guys than actually got killed. But,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a diplomatic answer, they'll sometimes say, about half get across and half don't. Again, I know people who disagree with that, but we don't know.
How do you imagine that area from the fence, from the road, whatever, to the stone wall? How do you imagine that looks during the battle? Is there any organization to the troops, or is it just a mess?
You're right.
I imagine fish in a barrel.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. And some of the accounts talk about that. Somebody says, Lee's army at that point looked like a disorganized mob.
Yeah.
The formations have broken down. You're trying to get everybody together. You got canister fire now coming at you. I think it's a mess. I think probably the best organization they can. Of course, because Pettigrew's guys have to go a little bit further in, to the inner or the upper angle or whatever we want to call that area. Fry, who, we saw him kind of commanding Archer's brigade, Fry talks about they kind of go to ground, I think more or less together. But, some of those guys get within a couple of yards of the stone wall, Mississippians coming up around with the 12th New Jersey front in the Bryan Barn. But I agree with you. I think by that point, it's probably a mess and just a mass of humanity.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
There's a slight lip just in front of the stone wall and Cemetery Ridge, kind of down toward where Hancock was. Go out there, go around them, guys. years ago, I was on a battle walk, and there was some talk of the Confederates using just the lip of maybe a few. It must be 20 yards in front of it or something like that, and then
that's where Wright's brigade came over. Yeah, that's up.
And then they're noted that it was so confused that they didn't even realize they were flanked until bullets started hitting guys in the back, and they started to turn to see what could possibly be going on, and they realized that they were totally
There was an area in there as well that some of the accounts referred to as the slashing, which was trees and stuff that had been taken down, and they just are probably just throwing them kind of in a pile over there. So you're right, Court. There's some rough ground over there that would have been that they talk about being used.
Yeah, just so confused and so bogged down that you just don't even realize what's going on.
Yeah. I can't. That's like I'm saying. I can't imagine the scene there. Like we talk about this with the Little Bighorn.
Yeah.
I don't. Son of the Morning Star, Gettysburg. They portray these things as cohesive, organized. You can make friend from foe. I don't think that's the way they are. These are people are killing each other, right? It's just I just picture them as slaughters.
Yeah. And if nothing else, the big clouds of smoke from the black powder. How you just would not nearly have the visibility to easily see the guy across the room.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to do that. So
now just recently. And we're talking. Obviously we're talking about Pickett's charge, so we're focusing on the Confederates on this one here. Yeah. And by the way, people say, "How come you don't do any Confederate stuff?" Here you go. Okay, we just talked about the Confederates.
It's in the name. Pickett.
So then, if I could add, since that comment was brought up, I just want to be clear because I've been accused of being a lost causer.
Really?
For taking it. Yeah. Like I'm from Western New York.
Yeah.
A lost causer. I'm not afraid to take on the hard topics. Sickles, Custer, Pickett's charge.
Right.
Some of my most disparaging comments have been Pickett's charge related. Just you're get over it. Your side lost. Kind of stuff.
Oh God.
We are not. I want to be clear to anybody watching later on YouTube or whatever. We are not making excuses for Lee or for the Army of Northern Virginia. We, as historians, whatever you want to call us, we are trying to understand the context on why and how this charge happened.
Trying to get to the truth.
Yeah, and if you're still triggered by that, turn it off and go watch something else.
Yeah. Seriously. You know what? Don't even dignify them with an explanation, okay? Hey, Tad, do me a favor while you're back there.
Yeah.
That little plaque that's on that's in front of you there.
Yes.
Read that. Read that to me. The quote.
The man in the arena?
That one. Read it. Read it.
Right.
Can you hear him? Can you hear him, Jim? Here, listen.
Hi, Jim. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
All righty. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena.
All right, that's enough. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Tad. Okay. That's what you say to those people on YouTube with their comments.
And actually, what I noticed in that scene, I think we've lost half of the control room. I think everybody, Debbie Jones went home.
Debbie Jones is sleeping. Right. I think she's curled up on the floor.
Mr. Wyman was caught kind of walking in from the other room. Yeah.
He's going and getting a piece of cheesecake.
Tim is on his phone. That's what I took away from that dramatic.
Everybody in the comments is like, "This is great. I'm learning so much. This is so awesome."
Good, thank you.
And our people in the room here are sleeping.
Yeah, what's up?
There's a difference. It's like the Kennedy and Nixon debates. It's different when you're listening on the radio than when you're watching on TV.
That's right. Well, because we're
sweating.
No, I was going to say we're as good looking as Kennedy is what I was going to say.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's also true.
We're the Kennedys.
Yeah.
Better.
Yeah.
We're better looking than Kennedy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would agree on that one. All right. So the Confederates lost Pickett's charge, but I do want to point out, we'll just jump across the wall to the Union side there.
Yes.
And back in, 2013, it was Obama who gave our boy Alonzo Cushing the Medal of Honor.
Yes.
150 years later.
I watched that live, and it was so
neat.
I
watched it too.
Yeah.
It was very cool to watch.
Yep.
And So, just wanted to point that out. It's a cool little tie-in to recent history.
Yeah,
When it
is.
said for combat operations in the vicinity of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
the way it made it sound like, he's on Okinawa or something. It's just,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I ended up shortly thereafter. I ended up giving a tour to the descendant.
Descendants.
That was
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
that's
that
cool.
was obviously a cool
Well,
experience.
you got me there, Jim. You got me there. All right. So what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to take a break. We got to do that, bathroom, whatever. And also we're going to get ready for your questions. We've got questions submitted by our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Also, we have somebody in the call queue. 717-420-1978 is the number to call if you'd like to get in there. And of course, super chats of $10 or more get read on the air. We'll be right back.
While we pay the bills, we hope you'll call 717-420-1978 and get in the queue to ask a Gettysburg Guide. We'll be right back.
Oh, the ocean waves do roll and the stormy winds do blow, and we poor sailors are skipping at the top while the landlubbers lie down below, 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 while the landlubbers lie down below.
hey, buddy, what's got you so down?
Hey, Court. I'm looking for a gift, but I just don't know what to get my Gettysburg friends and family.
Sounds like we need to have a talk. Come on. You love this place, don't you?
You bet I do. It's my favorite place in the world.
Well, you see, at Addressing Gettysburg, it's our mission to keep these stories alive.
How do we do that?
I'm glad you asked, sport. You see, Gettysburg is the gateway to the most brutal and crucial time in American history, so we interview experts, and our listeners learn with us.
That sounds amazing.
It is! Mike, are you f***ing serious?
What? It's for the commercial. What benefits do patrons get?
You mean besides up to 4 premium episodes per month and Matt being the bee's knees as host? Huh. How about early access to special episodes, behind-the-scenes insights, and discounts for ticketed events?
Whoa! None of the other history channels I follow do that for their listeners.
That's because Addressing Gettysburg doesn't take its listeners for granted and really cares about us learning American history.
You know, I should gift my Gettysburg friends and family an Addressing Gettysburg Patreon membership.
You see, the answer was right under your nose the entire time.
Make Addressing Gettysburg's Patreon a gift for the Gettys nerd in your family this holiday season. Addressing Gettysburg wants you to learn about the Civil War with us, and we need your support. We'll run this ad until it gets annoying, and then we'll run it until you become a patron at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg or by scanning the QR code on your screen. Happy holidays.
The hell are we staring at?
No idea.
At Digital History Pioneers Foundation, we are about grassroots history on digital platforms. That means we are about podcasters, documentarians, YouTubers, and even TikTokers. All of these creators are out there trying to share their love of history with the public. They don't need ideas, they need funding, both from viewers and corporate donors. DH Pioneers' initial funding focus is on the Civil War era, with a special emphasis on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast. So be a vital part of the unique content Addressing Gettysburg has in store by donating at dhpioneers.com and help bring your love of history to the people. Digital History Pioneers is an IRS Section 501c3 approved charitable corporation that makes any donation tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law.
What?
We're back.
10 seconds after you got down to 1.
Oh my God, we're back.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you about something very exciting that you do not want to miss, and I don't want to hear any excuses, okay? April 12th, mark it on your calendar. Actually, better than that, go to the link in the comments that I just pinned. Click on it and get yourself some tickets to a live Ask a Gettysburg Guide. You like watching it here? Well, imagine watching it in person. That is right. It's even better. live musical performance by Billy Webster, who does some of the music that you hear. Excuse me. And he did a full album of Civil War songs with kind of a punk rock kind of feel to them. Rock and roll. He's going to open the show with that. Britt Eisenberg. Who else?
Jesse Eisenberg.
Jesse Eisenberg is also going to be there. No, Britt Eisenberg's going to be there. Louis Trott's going to be there.
Of course.
Kevin Bryant's going to be there. Jim Hessler would be there, but he's coming back from England that day.
You did invite me to participate, which I greatly appreciate.
Yeah. And so, damn it, Jim.
Damn it.
And where did I leave off?
Cody.
Cody Aish from the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. This is also being sponsored by the Gettysburg Foundation, the Seminary Ridge Education Center, our very own Digital History Pioneers Foundation, and
listeners like you.
No, also community media.
Yeah.
And listeners like you. It's going to be a lot of fun, ladies and gentlemen. Come on out, have fun, ask a guide live. We've got some activities planned for you and other things like that. I think you're going to really like it. We were just over there at their warehouse picking out stuff for the set. It's going to be really cool.
Yes.
So click that link in the comment section, or if you're watching this after the live stream, it's in the description. Click the link, and we'll see you there on the 12th.
You didn't get in the phone queue during the break? Come on. What are you, chicken? 717-420-1978 is the number to prove me wrong. Super chats of $10 or more will be read on the air. Here's Matt.
Okay. You are...
Nobody calls him chicken.
You're
Nobody.
You're rough on this audience, Court.
What?
Yeah, what? I almost called you Tad. All right, so we're back. We've got a phone call. Let's get that first before we get into our submitted questions
is that
here.
My wife wondering where the hell I am.
That's right, Michelle. Hello, you're on the air, Michelle. No, I'm just kidding. This, I think, is from Down Under.
Oh.
Grant.
I need to.
Well, I don't know. I think maybe Grant has passed on. So,
jeez.
Let's say, maybe I should hit the talk button. I think this call is from Down Under. Grant, you're on the air. Good day.
G'day, mate. I was just waiting for a kindly old fellow to unmute me, so I'm here.
Hey, Grant, when is Christmas in Australia?
When is Christmas?
Yes. You do everything backwards down there. Oh, you do have it on the same day. Okay. Okay. All right, Grant, what's your question?
Another good question, Matt. Another good question.
Well, I'm learning about Australia. You know, every time you call in, I learn a little something. Have you heard of the, what's the name of the band?
Oh, yes. Grant, do you know the band called The Alarm and the song Rain in the Summertime?
No, but I'm getting old like Matt, so I'm not up with the hit music. So.
6 months older than I am. So
yeah.
All right, Grant, what's your question? We have a very, very long show already under our belt, and we really don't have time to dilly dally. Jim is tired.
I am tired.
I'd just like to say to Jim, I'm honoured to be able to speak to such a great podcaster. I like a guy who can take the history seriously, but not himself, and have a bit of fun with it. I'm a big fan of your show.
Well, first of all, Grant, thank you very much. Ignore this silly man with his beep button. Just ignore him. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Especially the wrestling references are always good to hear as well. It's a great podcast.
You like the wrestling references, you say.
And on this topic,
you are the Big John Stud of. Do you remember Big John Stud?
I do remember Big John. Of course we do.
I was at an antique shop the other day, and they had like all those old like solid rubber WWF wrestlers that were like weapons.
Yeah.
When your buddy like cheated or something, you whack him on the head with it, and then.
Well, Grant, on behalf of your long distance phone bill, I would just like to apologize that we've lost control at this point, but we love the wrestling references too. So.
Yeah. All right, go ahead, Grant. What's your question?
Mr. Hessler, that kind of thing never happens on your podcast. That's why I like it. But anyway, I'm sorry. And I got to say, your book with Wayne is fantastic. I can't wait to be able to use it when I can walk the ground when I come visit Gettysburg. So thank. It's
You're never going to come here, Grant. Stop, please. You keep chickening out.
So I got to get to my questions. I can move on with the show.
Oh yeah.
Jim, why was the troop formation in line of battle rather than in echelon? Like, to move across the field faster. Why line of battle? Because to me, that's a slower way of doing it.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think part of the alignment is based on the ground. I think in terms of, and I'm not sure if I'm answering the question even correctly, but I think in terms of Pickett's division in particular, they talk about really not having enough room to deploy it like they initially planned on it. So I think they go line of battle, Kemper, Garnett, and then Armistead behind him. I think part of that is just they talk about the amount of space that is in between Spangler's Woodlot and the Emmitsburg Road. I do know some people that have tried to characterize this as an echelon attack, and I don't think that's accurate, but I do think, there probably was some sense that at least Kemper would come over, hit him in echelon. Armistead is told, hey, when you come up, when you get up, you're going to make up the distance and maybe even end up on a line with Garnett. So I think it's kind of just a big, hot, confusing mess from that perspective. And I don't know if that's a great answer, but that's kind of my take on it.
It is.
Thank you, Grant. That was Mo.
And I just have one other thing. Thank you, Matthew. If I could just ask my second question, and then I'll be out of your hair.
Sure, 2 questions. Go ahead.
Out of his hair.
Oh, thank you. Jim, where did Lee watch the charge from? Was he observing it the whole time? Where was he? And
his lazy boy.
Did he or any of the other Confederates think to alter the attack or stop it as it was happening? Did they always have a positive sort of outlook until it ultimately failed?
That's a good question. We would probably assume that since Lee was mounted, he probably watched portions of it from different parts of Seminary Ridge, but it's generally believed that he watched much, if not all of it, from the area where the Virginia Monument is today. There is one account from the chief of artillery in Ewell's 2nd Corps, who for whatever reason is over in that vicinity. And he says at one point he sees Lee sitting on a log, again, about near where the Virginia Monument would be today with his head in his hand. And the officer assumed Lee was praying. Now, Longstreet, in contrast, seems to watch much of the attack from a position that's not very far away from that, kind of what we would call the point of woods, kind of out in front of that near Spangler's Woods. And Longstreet says he sits on a log and probably watches much of the attack from that. In later years, I think it was the 25th anniversary, but in later years, a newspaper guy said to Longstreet, well, if you thought it was such a bad idea, why didn't you call it off? And Longstreet's rebuttal was, because my commanding officer was on the ground a couple hundred yards behind me, and if he didn't call it off, I don't think I had the latitude to call it off. And you can't argue with that, but I think it shows kind of to answer your question that Lee was in the general vicinity watching it all unfold.
That's a good question, Grant.
Yeah, that was good. Thanks.
Yeah. Finally had
I have many.
All right, Grant, thank you very much for calling from down under. I'm sure it's probably very early in the morning.
Thanks,
there.
Grandpa.
You're welcome, Sonny. Talk to you later. All right, so let's go to our questions now. Harry Evans, he's got 3.
Okay.
3 questions, Harry, we call him.
Okay.
And he says, if the charge had broken through the Union center, what was the plan to hold that breach while being surrounded on 3 sides by superior numbers and artillery? So if they had actually broken through to the other side, as the doors might tell us, what was the plan then?
So there is a plan. If you take Armistead Long at face value, we met Armistead Long, about 4 or 5 hours ago at the beginning of the podcast. Long being Lee's military secretary. I won't read all of Long's account again, but I will go to the point where he says that by forcing the Federals at that point, we would turn towards Cemetery Hill. The right would be taken in flank, and the remainder would be neutralized. And what I think Heat Long is basically saying is the plan was we would cut them in half, isolate the two wings, kind of a left wing and right wing, and then we were going to go for Cemetery Hill. Now, the other part of the question, though, in terms of being surrounded on three sides, well, in theory, you wouldn't be surrounded because you would have presumably pushed the defenders back. And this goes into what we said earlier as well. You'd have kind of the second elements in the artillery limber up and come join you. So you'd have more guys there. Again, we're not going to repeat this. Does it make sense? They thought it made sense.
Okay. His next question is, history indicates several female soldiers, or female soldiers, were in the ranks with one mortally wounded near the Emittsburg Road. How did their presence affect the unit's cohesion? So, was it mortally wounded or dead?
So, I'm only aware in the historical record of one female, and she was found dead. Now, there has been some romantic historical fiction. Who was she? Was she a wife? Was she the daughter of the regiment? All kinds of stuff. And I have seen, I have seen other accounts where I've heard people refer to two females. I'm only aware of one in the historical record, and she comes up in the account of Brigadier General William Hayes. Now, William Hayes takes over the 2nd Corps after Hancock. They don't give it to Caldwell, they give it to William Hayes. During the burial details between July 2nd and July 5th, Hayes added, quote, remarks, one female private in rebel uniform. That's all we know about her. That's all we know. So, we might speculate, who was she? What to the other part of the question, what was her role in the ranks? We know nothing.
Despite the overwhelming destruction of the Confederate force, why did Meade refuse to pursue and counterattack on July 3rd? And what does that say about the true condition of the Union Army?
Yeah, so he doesn't refuse to counterattack, but he rides out to Little Round Top. Alfred Pleasanton, other staff officers are on the scene. They are observing it. Now, in Meade's testimony before the Joint Committee of the Conduct of the War, he will say, I considered making an attack, and he uses the term attack. I ordered skirmishers and stuff pushed forward. And what happens is these skirmishers being pushed forward really turns into more of what we would consider today a reconnaissance in force. McCandless's brigade, 5th Corps, Nevin's brigade of the 6th Corps, they kind of move up the Wheatfield Road. They rout some Georgians out of the Wheatfield, and then they stop. They don't make it as far as the Emmitsburg Road. So by that time, it's late in the day. Meade says in his testimony, the amount of time it took to execute, the amount of time it took to come back and give me the feedback, it was too late in the day, and they kind of run out of time. What that says about the Army of the Potomac and the situation in Meade's army, at that point in the day, the 5th Corps and the 6th Corps are his best options to do something. Now, people always say, people always say the 6th Corps is always scattered all over the field, but they've got 4 or 5 brigades in and around the left center area. So you could have done something with them, but you didn't. But you're not going to, the 2nd Corps is unorganized at this point. The 11th Corps, the 12th Corps is on the other side of the field. The 3rd Corps you're not going to use.
Yeah.
I think that's what that says about the condition of the Army.
Ken Wyman, who's in the back. Ken, would you like to come in and ask your question in person?
No, it's okay.
What? Would you like to ask it from back there?
I don't remember the question.
All right, I'll tell it to you and I'll whisper it to you and you say it into the microphone.
Oh, he's coming in.
Oh, he's coming in. Okay. Here. Put a star next to it. Give you a nice gold star there, Ken. There you go. It's all typed out, so you can ask it. Go ahead, ask it.
All right. Do you think Pickett's charge would have had a different outcome if E.P. Alexander had limited...
A little louder, please, or move near a microphone.
Would you like to use mine?
Yeah, there you go.
Do you think Pickett's charge would have had a different outcome if E.P. Alexander had limited the initial use of his artillery to guarantee the Confederates had ample supply during the duration of the attack?
Ken Wyman, ladies and gentlemen.
Ken Wyman.
Thank you, Ken.
No, your
Ken, by the way, had ancestors in both the 20th Maine and the 7th Cavalry.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I have neither. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I have neither too. So, all right. So go ahead. What's your answer to Ken?
Thank you,
there?
Ken. Ken, the answer is no. Artillery, we have to remember, was really, to me, the key to Lee's planning. And, when you go out there, as we said this before, and you shake your head at the mile of open ground, you have to remember that Lee intended that his artillery would break up the Federal artillery. That's the great failing of Pickett's charge. I do think the cannonade had some impact. It disrupted Meade's headquarters. It smashes up some Second Corps batteries in and around the angle. But if Alexander had limited his initial artillery to conserve ammunition, I don't think that solves the fundamental problem that you have of breaking up the Union artillery. If you shoot less, they're going to shoot less, and they'll still have more ammunition too. It doesn't, in my view, it doesn't solve the basic problem. But it's a good question, and Ken is a great guy.
Yeah, he is. Not just because he's in the room and he's armed, but.
Tim continues to look fascinated on his phone. Bravo, Tim. Bravo, Tim.
Tim's asleep.
Well, it is like midnight here.
I know. And I'm going to have to
shorten this.
That's fine. So let's see. 717-420-1978. We'll take a couple more calls if you want to call in, but then we'll close the lines. Kyle Vaughn, he says, did the memory of Malvern Hill ever factor into Lee's plans for July 3rd? Never quite understood how such a great commander and West Point student could make such a similar mistake twice in a year's span.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. And Kyle is, again, another guy that I know. Hi, Kyle, if you're watching. I mean, I certainly can't argue with that. I mean, Malvern Hill, July of 1862. It has a lot of the same elements. There's uncoordinated attacks, including one by Armstead, by the way. There are artillery issues, Federal artillery on a strong position. Confederate artillery isn't able to blast them off the field. There's a lot in common. I might argue that you could argue that, if Lee knows the attack on Malvern Hill failed and was a disaster, maybe we shouldn't attack Cemetery Hill. That could be another reason in favor of the Cemetery Ridge theory. But I think one of you Corey, you might have said it before. Maybe Mike said it when he called in. What you could also look at is Gaines' Mill. Which happened, only slightly before Malvern Hill. And what you have at Gaines' Mill is you isolate part of the Union 5th Corps, so you get superior numbers against inferior numbers. Yeah. Even though it's a frontal assault, you have some artillery support. The terrain and the opponent kind of works in Lee's favor. So I think the problem is when we either pro or con, when we try to compare these things to prior battles, you're never going to get the same conditions recreated again. And, for as much as we criticize Lee on July 3rd, Wright's brigade got to that point on July 2nd. So that's proven that you can get to the point. Can you exploit and hold the point? And that's where the greater numbers in the artillery of July 3rd comes in, and again, ultimately doesn't work. But I think that's why he thought it would work.
Matt Roof says, do we have a general understanding of how veteran Confederate soldiers viewed the tactic of a concentrated attack on the center when they learned of it? Their morale seemed to be high,
yes,
even though the second was somewhat of a draw. Is there any record of men on the ground who would be doing the actual fighting, feeling that this would be a slaughter, considering their previous experiences, or do we have a picture across the board that most felt it could be done?
Well,
it's a good question.
Yeah,
Matt.
no, it's a great question. And, obviously somebody is going to say, well, you're pulling all these post-battle accounts and they wrote it after the fact. Well, again, no shit. Nobody stops the battle to write anything on the field other than a field order. So it's always after the fact.
Right.
But, we do have some accounts. Randolph Shotwell in the 8th Virginia, he said those who participated in the charge saw nothing of the rashness, the blind folly, or the uselessness of the attempt. On the contrary, we were in splendid spirits and confident of sweeping everything before them. I refer to the rank and file. Yeah. So there you go. The guy David Johnston, 7th Virginia. Overconfidence pervaded the Confederate Army from the commanding general down to the shakiest private. One more. Private Erasmus Williams of the 14th Virginia described a lieutenant smiling and chatting while the cannonade was going on. Now, that lieutenant was subsequently blown away by a shell.
Right.
But these guys talk about confidence, smiling and chatting, and, everybody in the rank and file. I'm sure we could probably pull out 3 accounts where somebody said, oh my God, we're all going to die.
Yeah,
sure.
But I think at best, you probably got a mixed view. But clearly there is some confidence in the ranks.
Rick from Ohio. You're on the air. Rick from Ohio.
Hi, Matt and Jim. Thanks for taking my question. Jim, first of all, I wanted to say, was at your event at the seminary a couple weeks ago. It was a great event. Thanks for doing that. I'm looking forward to doing some more.
Thank you for coming.
My question, you're very welcome. My question has to deal with the 2nd Mississippi during the charge. It's kind of a family argument that we have as far as they made it on the battlefield. I was wondering if you could clarify anything for me on that.
Yeah, I mean, we do believe elements of the Mississippians reached the Bryan Barn, which on that part of the field, other than climbing over the stone wall, that's about as far as you can get. There are accounts of officers being captured around the barn. There's as we're sitting here near the Gettysburg Museum of History, there's that a story that Eric Dorr tells of his great-great-grandfather finding Mississippi buttons right in front of the stone wall. Some of the Mississippians we know were captured and pulled over the walls. So I think you can go back to a proud family lineage there and tell them I think Mississippi got as far as anybody else on that day.
And the last thing I'll say is that we are really proud because at the end of the battle, during roll call, there was only one person that came back from the 2nd Mississippi, and that was my great-great-great-grandfather, James Pickney Kaiser.
Wow.
So we're really proud of that. But we consistently argue of how far they made it, and I've always felt that's as far as they made it. That's where they showed they made it. But
I think they did.
I do appreciate you taking my question, Matt. Good job as always. I really appreciate you guys, and I hope you have a great night.
And Rick, I'm sure we'll see you on the 12th, right? Okay, Rick, thank you very much.
You got it. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that is Rick from Ohio. Thank you very much for the call there. Rick Earl Anderson is next. He said, I just read E.P. Alexander's book. His take on how the charge should have been structured was the best I've ever read. He places a lot of blame on Ewell and Hill and ultimately on Lee's command style. Do you think the CSA might have prevailed using EPA's idea?
Yeah, interesting. So, Earl, thanks for the question. If you're listening, Alexander wrote a lot. So he has his military memoirs. He has what was later published as Fighting for the Confederacy. So, I'm not sure specifically which book Earl is referring to. Alexander also left an account that I often refer to from the Southern Historical Society papers because it predates any of those. It goes to the 1870s. But if you're talking about how Alexander described it in military memoirs, what Alexander really kind of talked about is what he calls the real salient, sort of the western face of Cemetery Hill near Robert Rhodes's line. And to try to shorthand this, Alexander talks about, if they could accumulate troops and artillery on the edge of the town, that might have been, and this is where Ewell and Hill's guys would play in more than Longstreet's, that he felt might have been a weak point to kind of exploit both by the infantry and the artillery. And Alexander is critical. Alexander's a great Monday morning quarterback like we all are, but Alexander is critical of a lot of the Confederate officers for quote unquote not appreciating this opportunity. So Earl, I hope that's the version you were referring to. So it's an interesting premise. Alexander also talks about the inability of the Confederate artillery to enfilade, as he uses the term, enfilade artillery fire onto Cemetery Ridge, again, from some of these northern positions. So at the end of the day, again, he's critical for Ewell and Hill for really not recognizing, some of this strength as Alexander saw it north and west of town. I don't know that I agree. Like, certainly if you go out there today, I would kind of look and say, well, where the hell would you put those batteries?
Yeah.
But again, I think, kind of to what you said earlier, Porter Alexander knew more about Civil War artillery than we do.
Sure.
So, you got to take that with a grain of salt. I don't know if it would have worked. He thought it was a better opportunity and, ultimately not exploited.
Well, also, nothing looks the same as it did back then.
Yes.
So you go to those points and you go, well, where the hell are you going to put it?
Right.
But you can't see what they saw because it's all blocked by buildings and trees.
It is. The flip side being there were also a lot more skirmishers out there in July.
Right.
So more people shooting at you than today.
Right, yeah,
unless you're going down Washington Street at night. Right?
Jeff Pasnick says, there have been other open field charges. What makes the Pickett-Pettigrew-Trimble charge the one most people think of? This is a good question about memory.
It is.
right?
It's a good, you're right. And hi, Jeff. It is a good point about memory. And look, it's Gettysburg, baby, right? I mean, it's Gettysburg. And so, and Jeff probably knows this, anything associated with Gettysburg gets amplified over any other charge on any other field. I often call Gettysburg the Super Bowl of the Civil War.
Uh-huh.
And again, you'll get the occasional listener who says, ew, sports analogies, gross. But then they call us Disneyland and nobody objects to that.
Right.
Nobody objects to that.
Because everybody loves Disney.
Exactly. Oh yeah, everybody does. But I think long story short, and we can't, for anybody who may not know, we can't dismiss the role of John Bachelder in playing up this as the high water mark and the turning point of the war.
The guy starts doing history of it before the war's over.
Yeah.
Like there's wounded men here that he's taking around the battlefield. They're still convalescing.
Yeah.
And he's getting their stories down.
If Bachelder had gone to Franklin and convinced everybody that was the high water mark of the war, okay, so
we'd all be there.
But this would be addressing Franklin, right?
Yeah,
so
which won't have the same ring.
No.
Bob Passamenti, our benefactor for tonight. Bob wants to know, he says, one of the most compelling parts of your Sentinel work on Pickett's charge is a rather granular look at the Union command kerfuffle on Cemetery Ridge, specifically the clash between General Hancock and General Hunt over artillery fire. Hancock wanted his guns firing to keep up infantry morale, while Hunt wanted to conserve ammunition for the coming assault. In your view, James, did General Hancock's interference actually jeopardize the Union's ability to repel the charge, or did it heighten it? And did this itself highlight a larger issue in your research regarding General Meade's leadership during the most climactic point of the battle?
Yeah, okay. And again, thanks, Bob. Looking forward to seeing you here in Gettysburg in a couple of weeks. The Hancock-Hunt debate always has to be addressed in some way. It's just a fun sort of human interest butting of heads. I think something we can all relate to. Look, the nut of the debate is that Brigadier General Hunt considers himself in charge of all artillery on the field, while Major General Hancock considers himself entrusted with the defense of the Union left center. That's basically what the debate all comes down to. So Hunt going around telling artillerists, cease fire, slow your rate of fire, conserve ammunition. Hancock, though, thinks that whole zone is his and that Hunt is just a staff officer, and Hancock wants to see a vigorous artillery defense. That's sort of summary of the debate. Now, did it make a difference, and did it jeopardize the Union defense? I'll be honest, again, when I look at it, I have a hard time seeing, did it really jeopardize the defense? The Second Corps batteries allegedly keep firing. McGilvery's guys who are more under Hunt's jurisdiction, they slow their rate of fire. Hancock will later say, hey, the enemy got to our line because we were imperfectly supplied with ammunition, while Hunt will say, well, if that infantry general would have followed my orders to stop firing, they would have had plenty of ammunition. Hunt said Hancock's move nearly jeopardized the defense. Again, I don't really see that it did, but I'll fall back onto our default position tonight. who am I to argue artillery with Henry Hunt, commander of the Army of the Potomac's artillery?
There you go. And finally, Ken Miller. Ken sent a bunch in. I'm going to choose 2 of them, and I'm sorry, Ken, but we're at 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Is that all?
So I've got to get home.
Yeah.
Ken, he's yeah, right. Jim, that's you. He says, what first inspired you to take such a deep dive into Pickett's charge, and what did you and Wayne Motts uncover that changed your own understanding of it?
So, long story short, it came around in a couple of ways. It was circa 2010 when we were sort of talking about this. I wanted to do something after my Sickles book came out. We were kind of having conversations. Hey, nobody had ever done a field guide to Pickett's charge. A lot of great Pickett's charge, but nobody had done a field guide using the battlefield. Well, who better to do that than 2 licensed battlefield guides? So long story short, talked to Wayne about it. We agreed to do it, and yada, yada, yada. That was kind of how it came together. I don't know, because it's hard now to kind of recreate my thinking from 12, 13 years ago. Like what? I think what I 13 years ago I came away with a better appreciation of was this idea that Lee himself in his reports really credited the failure of the artillery with being the cause of the failure of the charge. It wasn't North Carolina versus Virginia bullshit. That it really was, the failure of the artillery to support the attack. And I don't know that I learned that, but I came away with that more impressed that was really a key factor. I'll just tell you one quick story that I think the book uncovered for a lot of people. 13, 14 years ago, nobody realized or appreciated that General Armistead had his son, Walker Keith Armistead, here with him on the field and on staff. And I will tell you, when the book came out and somebody would sit across the table from me and go, "What are you going to tell me that I didn't know about Pickett's charge?" And we would say, "Well, did you know Armistead's son Walker?" No, I didn't know that. Now it's been in subsequent other books and people use it on tours. And all I'm going to say is if you're using it in a book, please cite us, because we were really the first ones to do that. And that was really based on research Wayne had. The information was always there, but we just sort of had to put it together. So what's the point? The presence of Walker Keith Armistead doesn't impact the outcome of Pickett's charge in any way, shape, or form. But what it tells me, tells us, and hopefully tells you, the listeners, is that there are probably still other great personal human interest stories out there waiting to be told. Yeah. Right? And we will never know all of the stories behind this.
Was he near Armistead when he was hit?
We don't know. That we don't know. Okay. Yeah, he was on staff and seemed to have rode forward.
He survived?
He survived the charge, went on to live a moderately long life. But yeah, there's still a lot about him we don't know. But before that, I don't think anyone knew anything about him.
And then the second thing he wants to know is, what's the most surprising artifact or primary source you've encountered related to the charge or its participants?
Shit. Because I kind of just answered that in terms of what was the most surprising kind of thing.
So I'm glad I picked. It's basically the same answer.
Yeah. Basically the same answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Even unless you want to take another question or wrap it up, but
he's got a whole bunch of them here. Let me ask him one more.
How about the high watermark label?
Okay. Yeah. All right. Good. If we erased the famous high watermark label and started fresh, what phrase would you use to describe July 3rd, 1863?
Well, I like that question because in pro wrestling terms, we could call it the big finish.
Okay.
Right? The big finish is a pro wrestling term, and that basically how you finish off your opponent.
Good night, Irene.
Good night, exactly. Well, do people say, I was thinking like the suplex.
No, isn't it, didn't Mean Gene Okerlund used to say that?
Oh,
remember
maybe.
Mean Gene?
Yeah, I do.
He'd be like, good night, Irene.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. The big, what would
That's the last time I watched wrestling.
What would I call it in 1863 terms? The grand climax or something like that. I think the point, this is why I want to close on this for the night. I think the point for people who want to say Pickett's charge was meaningless, anticlimactic, boring, straightforward, you often hear this from the Culp's Hill Mafia, who needs to support Culp's Hill at the expense of Pickett's charge. The veterans in history have remembered this as the big finish.
Yeah.
And I think it is. I think it legitimately is.
Well, Jim, I have to say, Steve Sims coming on doing a live stream several years ago was our record of concurrent live viewers.
Oh, yeah?
At 150. And we are at 166 concurrent live viewers.
Nice. Thank you.
So there you go, Jim. You're coming on every week now. You know what, Jim? You're my co-host now.
We could work on it.
You know what? We're putting the two shows together. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right. It's a hostile takeover, right? Mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, murders and executions.
This country was built on. Right?
That's exactly right.
Right.
No, but thank you all for watching, listening, whatever you do. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and also hype. You can hype now. I don't know what that means, but it actually helps. All of this helps. We thank you very much. And of course, we're going to see you all on April 12th. Just go ahead and click that link there. That's pinned right at the top. And that's it. Tim, I'm glad you're awake now. Ken, thanks for coming. Debbie, thanks for coming. Tad, thanks for doing a good job. Court, thanks for doing a good job with the comments. Jim, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. You know I love having you on. And of course, we have to thank Bob Passamenti for our wonderful dinner tonight. And the people at the Dobbin House for preparing a delicious meal. And I hope you guys have hungry people at home because you're taking a lot of this food. Because I can't take it all.
Everybody's got a hungry heart.
That's right. All right. See y'all later.
Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide is produced by Matt Callery, Mikey B. Bariski, and Tad Scase. Hosted by Matt Callery, featuring Mikey B. and Court Nicker. Engineered by Tad Scase. Guests booked by Dave Bussiere of TR Historical. Broadcasting from and recorded at the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios. Thanks for listening.
Instead of small drink down there and pay the reckoning on the nail, no man forget shall go to jail for carrying on in glory. Instead of small drink down there and pay the reckoning on the nail, no man forget shall go to jail for carrying on in glory.
Copyright 2026, Addressing Gettysburg LLC, all rights reserved.